hoping my mic is working? Perfect, good. This is my first time doing anything like this. And I have a couple of things that I have to say and that I'm excited to say. But before I get to those, I just honestly, I know this sounds trite and contrived, but I promise you it's not. Thank you all so much for being here. It's going to be an interesting evening. I'm really excited for the panelists that we have that we're going to be talking with after you sit through my half hour of rant. And we've got a couple of calls to action that we're going to throw up at the end as well, because there's some really good things that I think that are available for people who, if you have any sort of moral compass whatsoever, I suspect after the first half hour you'll be properly outraged. All of that being said, even though this isn't a coal symposium, and I can't claim to have the most First Nations relatives of anyone in Alberta, I'm glad somebody got that joke. I want to start with the land acknowledgement. Tonight, the Breakdown is recording this on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. I want to acknowledge the importance of the treaties, and the work of honoring the treaties is an ongoing one that will never be completed. And that's a really, really important piece that I think that we don't talk about enough. Land acknowledgements have become a contentious issue, but it's become a contentious issue because I think that there's a lot of people who labor under the mistaken assumption that, we'll be done. At some point, we'll be done. And we won't be. And that's okay. That's a good thing. It's part of growing and healing as a country. So there's the official Breakdown land acknowledgement. I know I already said thank you, but it's so important to me that I wrote it down twice, so I'm going to say it again. I really do want to acknowledge the incredible support that all of you are showing for the show and for me. It's hard to believe it's been 6 years of the Breakdown, and in the first year I was standing on the steps of the Alberta legislature with a Jason Kenney puppet that my wonderful wife Nikki made in like minus 1,000 degrees. And here we are now. We do have another puppet. I'm trying to navigate that, and maybe that'll come up in the Q&A section, because like it's a weird space that I occupy right now. But the Breakdown wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here, the show wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you, especially given some of the recent goings-ons. So thank you all again. And with that, I have a remote. I bought it 3 days ago. Bear with me. It's so crazy to see it on such a big screen. Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Nate Pike, and tonight we are here to talk about the UCP's book bans. And as well try to present, like I said, a couple of ways that you can potentially push back on some of these things. And make no mistake, these are book bans. As much as the minister responsible and his cadre of Timu Mats try to say that they're not, the policies absolutely are book bans, but we're going to prove that as we go. In order to try to understand the mechanics of the book bans, it might be helpful to approach it, or at least what we're going to try to do tonight, is approach it with three distinct questions in mind. The first one is, how did it come about? The second one is, how was the policy developed and rolled out? And we got a fun little Easter egg in there for you. Stumbled across it earlier this week and was just like, of course, of course. And what does it all mean? What are the implications? And for that, that's where I'm going to be leaning heavily on the panel that's going to be joining us in just a little bit. So let's start with how they came about, or at least what is publicly known about what they came about. It's tempting to start with the initial announcement from Education Minister Dimitris Nicolaides on May 26th that he was launching a survey to hear from Albertans what their beliefs were, and he decided 4 books in particular. The first one was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, Flamer by Mike Corrado, Blankets by Craig Thompson, and Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. Now, we've talked about these graphic novels before on the show. We're going to try to do like a little compressed version here tonight. But here's what you need to know in a nutshell. All 4 are large format graphic novels. And in each, there are panels that include some portrayals of nudity, sexual acts, abuse, or self-harm. But panels in a 500-page book don't define that book. So let's talk about each of them quickly. Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, get the hang of it, is actually a memoir. And the title is very much sarcastic. It's literally titled A Family Tragicomic. And the book details abuse by an authority figure that is very much framed as abuse. It's not to titillate or anything like that. It's the story of an author growing up in a small town and coming of age as a lesbian. Now, to Fun Home's credit, in 2009, Fun Home was listed as one of the best books of the previous decade by the Times of London, Entertainment Weekly, Salon.com, and the Onion's AV Club. In 2010, the Los Angeles Times named Fun Home as one of the 20 classic works of gay literature. In 2019, it was ranked 33rd on the Guardian's list of 100 best books of the 21st century. This isn't smut. This is a recognized piece of work. Next on their list was Flamer by Mike Corrado. It's a semi-biographical book, so it's based on his experiences, but viewed through the lens of a character that he created. That character's name is Aiden. One of the primary themes present in Mike Corrado's debut graphic novel is the toxic masculinity and homophobia that the main character Aiden navigates during his time at Catholic school and summer camp. This all occurs with the backdrop of Aiden trying to fit in and mirror homophobic behavior himself while he tries to reconcile the fact that he is himself queer. The conflict eventually leads Aiden to thoughts of self-harm. Flamer received the Lambda Literary Award in 2021 in the Young Adult category. The main themes of Flamer are toxic masculinity, homophobia, bullying, and suicide and self-harm as a result of toxic masculinity, homophobia, and bullying. While there are things that are alluded to, there's nothing explicitly shown in this book. The next book is Blankets by Craig Thompson. This is another memoir. It tells the story of growing up in a deeply religious family, sexual abuse by an authority figure, and falling in love. It has won 8 awards for being a comic. And then the big one that everybody loves to light their hair on fire about. If I can, there we go. Genderqueer. This is a book by Maya Kobabe, and I apologize if I'm not exactly pronouncing it right. It received an Alex Award in 2020, which is an award given by the American Library Association to books written for adults that have special appeal to young adults ages 12 through 18. That hasn't stopped the UCP from cherry-picking to justify their censorship efforts, though.
So anybody listening can look up the author of Genderqueer. It was a New York Times article, if memory serves me correct, and so they can look it up for themselves, where she says very clearly, I do not recommend this book for children.
Anyone can look it up for themselves. So we did. The quote is actually a rebuttal to some complaints that were made by Senator Kennedy. And the whole quote reads, "It keeps being called a children's book. Senator Kennedy implied it was a children's book. But I think that's coming from a misreading of the comic book form. Genderqueer is a comic and in full color, but that doesn't mean it's for children. I originally wrote it for my parents and then for older teens who are already asking these questions about themselves. I don't recommend this book for kids." So very clearly, the author right there is making a distinction between very young kids and older teens that are more likely to be dealing with these issues, which any reasonable person should be able to do because development. The government included several pages from each of these books, of course the most shocking and graphic ones, completely out of context, and included that in a package that was provided to those completing the survey that Nicolaides announced. But that's not where this all started. We filed an Access to Information Act request. It's not FOIP anymore. We filed an Access to Information Act request to look into some of the things that Nicolaides said at the launch. This is one of them.
Thank you, Garrett. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me here today. I think as we can all agree, school libraries spark imagination and foster a lifelong love of learning within our children. When kids go to school and visit their school library, we want to know that they're finding age-appropriate materials on the shelves. Yet, unfortunately, through investigations conducted by my office, we have found books in K-12 schools that show extremely age-inappropriate content. I'm here today to discuss an important initiative that Alberta's government is undertaking to ensure that materials in our school libraries, particularly those with graphic sexual content, are developmentally appropriate. And I want to be clear right from the onset, this is not a question of banning specific books or specific titles, but rather establishing clear policies and guidelines for all school divisions to follow.
It's not a book ban. We're not targeting specific titles. But here's 4 specific titles that we'd like you to look at. But the interesting part for us at the breakdown was all of a sudden now, oh, we've done an investigation. The government did an investigation. There's going to be records of that. So we filed our FOIP requests, our Access to Information Act requests. But there's something else that Nicolaides said that gets to be really important in this conversation.
What prompted these right now?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, a group of parents approached me and provided me with excerpts from many of these books and other material. Initially, to be very honest, I was very skeptical. I thought that this was maybe examples from other jurisdictions or other countries. They showed me information, though, that suggested that it was indeed available at a variety of different schools. And what really got me concerned is when they indicated that they had information that demonstrated this was available in elementary schools. So that's why we took a closer look over the next couple of months to see if this was indeed the case and validated and verified the information, which we've confirmed is indeed the case. So that was the particular incident that kind of raised this to our attention.
Now, there's some super fun wordplay that the minister is deploying in that response to that question by that reporter, who, if I recall correctly, was from the Epoch Times. Do with that what you will. But it didn't take long after that press conference where 2 groups stepped up to try to take credit for this new initiative. One of them was Parents for Choice in Education. The other one was Action for Canada. And there's a lot going on with those guys. From the Action for Canada website, they issued a statement almost immediately after the press conference. Action for Canada's Calgary team has been working very hard behind the scenes, communicating with government officials over several months through serving the SOGI 123 Notice of Liability, because they believe that if they serve notices of liability for people who are using curriculum that informs sexual orientation and gender identity, then they can sue them. And providing evidence, some of which was submitted by concerned citizens, of sexually explicit books found throughout Alberta. They also submitted a comprehensive binder containing extensive evidence and information outlining the harms of SOGI 123 and the dangers of exposing K-12 students to pornographic content in school libraries. Now, it's worth noting that when we take a look at the things that Action for Canada decides to invest its energy into, ignoring the fact that the leader of the group has been banned from multiple city councils and school board meetings on the West Coast, they are anti-vax, they are anti-science, they are a far-right religious group that spouts regularly anti-LGBTQ2S+ policies and ideas. The 5G technology is even on their list of current action items. So these are the folks that the minister listened to and was handed a binder from, and at no point did anybody in the minister's office apparently say, what's the credibility of these folks before we go banning books? In that ATI request, that access to information request we did, we were provided with a grand total, brace yourselves, 5 emails that the minister's office received over the last 3 years addressing the concerns about these books. Now, this is from the government themselves. This is not, we got incomplete results. This is, we said, we would like all of the emails that you received. Redact what you need to. Totally fine. Completely understand. We just want to know how many there were. They gave us 5. One of them goes back all the way to August 25th, 2023, and it included materials from our good friends at Action for Canada. It also included concerns about SOGI and DEI, because of course it did. There was also a September 2nd, 2023 email, which prompted a September 5th email from the Premier's office asking the minister to address it, about a children's book, It Feels Good to Be Yourself. There's nothing in this book that is anywhere near any of the definitions in the minister's order. It's a children's book for kids ages 4 to 6. I mean, the art alone kind of speaks for it. It gets even weirder, though, because there was another email on July 6th, and this is the one that seems to really have lit the fire under the minister's office to respond. And it detailed all of the very, very bad books that we should have on there. And the books that the minister referenced are on this list. Where it gets really wild is in the minister's response. Because he sent an email on July 6th, 2024, that was reasonable. It was nuanced. It was well-informed. In it, he even said, in the response to the person that was sending these materials, teachers collaborate with expert specialists, colleagues, school leaders, parents, and stakeholders regarding resources to best address the needs of students and provide a balanced approach to implement curriculum. This approach ensures students receive a quality education that is respectful of both community and individual values. I'm not going to step in. The teachers, the librarians, they're qualified. I'm going to let them do it. That's a perfectly reasonable response. So it wasn't the official position of the ministry to initiate these kinds of changes that these folks were wanting. At least it appears not until Action for Canada got a word in with the Premier. But let's let them tell their story. It's a long clip, and there's parts of it that are going to be deeply frustrating, hopefully offensive. But they walk through the whole situation, and it's shocking how well it aligns with the claims that Dimitris Nicolaides has made himself about how the policy was developed.
And so what we did is we actually, what's that called? We delivered it to 4 of the top ministers in our government. So once we had compiled all the information, including testimonials, so Sandra's testimonial, we also had all the resources in Alberta that were despicable, including the SOGI 123, which we have here, but we also have this PRISM guide that was created by the Alberta Teachers Association. It was also created in partnership with the then NDP government that was in power at the time. And so they did a joint initiative to create this PRISM toolkit to deal with diversity, equity, inclusion. And so it was opening the door and shoehorning its way in. And of course, they have a book list of books that they would recommend. So we presented that. We presented the actions that we took in against what happened in Lumsden, Saskatchewan, and then Verdun, Manitoba, and other places. We compiled that together and said, look, this is the public reaction. So you're going to have to deal with this. Plus, we had just the most beautiful timing of the release of the CAST report, as well as the WPATH files. And so we have both of those linked. And the government officials were aware of it, but I don't know if they had been feeling that there was a compelling reason to do a deep dive into it. So needless to say, that book was huge, that binder. And we sent it to the Premier's office. We sent it to the Minister of Education. We sent it to the Health Minister and also to the Deputy Premier, which happened to be both Sandra and I. We live in that riding. And so he's our MLA. So we thought, well, we have ways in. We're going to try to work our network and get in there. So that's our first step. And that was way back a year ago where we were putting that binder forward. And then we weren't really hearing back from them. So from that point, it's a little bit like you just got to be tenacious. And I call it get the elbows out. So you get in there and you keep calling and you keep being persistent. And that's what led us to finally getting a meeting with the minister via actually the premier. I got to a meeting and I got up to the microphone and I said, thank you so much, Premier, for your policies that you've put in place for the transgender and no sex change for kids under 18 and that sort of thing, and no puberty blockers and all that. From there, we ended up getting from the premier the commitment that she would let the Minister of Education know that we had a binder of information that we wanted to get before him to discuss. And so from there, we ended up with a meeting.
We put in this binder copies of the questionable sexually explicit materials, the alphabet cards, some of the books, flip books and different things like that. So when we got to the meeting with the Minister of Education, he was, well, I gave my personal testimony because my son was captured through schools, through SOGI, because it was a perfect storm of when SOGI came into the school system in Alberta, and he was going through, regular teenage angst, whatever. So that was good to be able to bring personal, real life harm that split my family up and damaged a child. And then with Kim having the information of the books that we were investigating and wanting him to look at, and we would like to have a complete audit in the system in Alberta. His eyes just lit up. He said, "This is what I've been waiting for. This is what I needed."
And take that a step further, Sandra, and, just so our audience knows, how many families in this nation have had their children affected. It's in the tens of thousands of kids that have gotten captured by this social contagion and the learning. And so it's not just about these pornographic books, which it desensitizes our children so they can't recognize even predatory behavior. But the next step, as you were saying, this is just a start, a very, very positive start. But what we need to take out is SOGI 123. I think one of the issues we need to bring up with the provincial government is that, that we would appreciate it if they would even take this to a different level as well with the RCMP, because I believe people need to be arrested at any other time in the history. Many people within this community who are really strong activists that we have seen come to the front line or who have gotten into these positions as schools or teachers, there's a lot of child pornography that flows among some of these people, and as well as abuse.
So, only because I do not want to let that go unresponded to, nobody is LGBTQ2S+ because they've been captured. They're that way because that's who they are. And when the big reason that people cite for instituting social policy is because their kids got captured and it split their family apart, I'm going to editorialize for a second. She split her family apart. These are the materials that were included in the Freedom of Information Act that we got from the government of Alberta. This is reference material that they provided. The story that they just told aligns with the story that Demetrius Nicolaides aligned, and it's not like, I mean, we haven't been able to track down the meeting notes or anything, or the specific meeting where Kim McBride had her conversation with the Premier, but it's not like it would be the first time that somebody approached the current Premier of Alberta with an idea that most reasonable people would laugh out of the room, and the Premier's gone, I like it. But then we got the survey. And this is, there's been this policy advisor and this press secretary that have been getting up in the breakdowns business this last week. It's been a week, like a couple weeks actually, and they're very bad at it. It's almost disappointing. But it's bad faith communications. And the whole survey and the way that they presented the responses to the survey were bad faith communications. At what age should children be able to access materials with sexually explicit content in school libraries? They broke it down very, very nicely, but the reality is 62% of respondents agreed 12 years old and up. They broke it down into some other categories, but 62% agreed 12 years old and up. Parents were the most supportive, with a whopping 42%. Now, I'm no math teacher. We're going to bring Carla Peck and Jason Schilling up in a sec, but I'm pretty sure 42 does not represent a majority. And I don't know that it represents a qualified majority, because when you take a look at the other people on these lists who have the training and the education and the capability to make these determinations and communicate them effectively, it's a different question entirely. The appropriateness of the materials. Here's how big the problem was. Have you ever been concerned about a book in a school library being inappropriate for a certain age group due to sexually explicit content? It's such a big problem, it never even occurred to 61% of the respondents before the government of Alberta decided to light their hair on fire. Who do you think should decide what materials are age appropriate in schools? Only 36% chose people who don't have expertise. Flip the number. That means 64% of people want people with expertise making these decisions. And in a fun little twist, I've read this slide so many times, my eyes hurt. I don't see government anywhere on there. Should parents and guardians play a role in reporting or challenging the availability of materials with sexually explicit content in school libraries? 62% of respondents agree or strongly agree that parents should play a role in reporting or challenging. Haven't they been? I could go back to the 64% slide. But 64% of parents, there's two options. There's only two ways that we can cut this. 64% of parents are totally disengaged with their children's education, or they're engaged with it and they're fine. But again, another little piece that was left out of the government survey. This one gave me some hope. Should parental consent be required for children to access materials with sexually explicit content in school libraries, regardless of age? 52% of respondents said no, 4% had no opinion. It's a charged question, though, because again, what are we talking about when we're saying sexually explicit? It's open to a lot of interpretation. Probably need some experts to make that interpretation, not some press secretaries. Support for the new standards. And it blows my mind that they tried to take a victory lap. Nicolaides, I'm going to play another clip from Jespo in a bit because it's another example of the comms. But Nicolaides claims that 44% is a mandate. The math ain't mathin'. Where were the books actually found? And this is important. This is important context. We got the list. We got the whole list of where all of the books were found that the UCP made these decisions on. There were 2 copies of Flamer found in K through 9 schools. 1 copy in a 4 through 9 school, 1 copy in a 7 through 9 school, and 4 copies in a 10 through 12 school. 14 is what Flamer is recommended for. Genderqueer, also 14. 1K through 9, 1-5 through 9, and 5-10 through 12. Fun Home, 15 plus. 1K through 12, 1-7 through 12, and 6-10 through 12. Blanket, 16 plus, 1K through 12, 2-7 through 9, 1-8 to 12, 6-10 to 12. Now, the way that the UCP wants to spin this is, well, they're in the schools where there's the kids. We're going to address that in a second, because there's a very big problem with that assumption. Because that's not the only result that we got back. This is where it started. On November 4th, 2024, James Johnson, who is the chief of staff to Demetrius Nicolaides, sent out an email to a ministerial assistant. Can we see which books are banned the most and see if they're in ours where appropriate? That ministerial assistant, that ministerial staffer, Elizabeth Harper. And the answer to the question that most of you are already probably thinking right now is, as far as we can tell, the answer is yes. It'll sink in. It's the last name that's the giveaway. This is what he asked her to look into. This was a tweet from Mindshift. More than 10,000 book bans in public schools in the 2023 school year represented a nearly 200% rise in book bans. The new Index of School Book Bans offers a state-by-state and district-by-district database of book bans searchable by author and title. It came from Penn. This is an anti-censorship group. They went through and used the Penn information as well as information from the Austin list, which is the Austin Public Libraries list, which is anti-censorship. And they said, Elizabeth Harper, as you'll see below, most of the novels from the Austin list are found in CBE and EPSB schools. Only 16% of books banned in Austin weren't found in EPSB, and roughly 19 weren't found in CBE. So at this point, here's the Austin Public Library list. At this point, we know that the books were in age-appropriate libraries supervised by teachers and librarians. We know that the far-right conspiracy theory group Action for Canada claims that they were able to leverage relationships, including with the Premier, to get a meeting with the Education Minister. We know that the American censorship lists were used to compare Alberta's progress. We know that the books cited were all award-winning graphic novels. And we know that the government's own engagement results don't support sweeping government reforms or intervention. So with all of that, the government introduced sweeping reforms and intervention, except for religious texts. And this is where it gets wild, because the government made the argument that, they're making the argument, any graphic sexual materials, anything that it doesn't matter if it's text, if it's images, if it's graphic novel, it doesn't matter what it is. It should not be available under any circumstances to protect the kids, unless it's in a religious text, and then it's fine. And according to at least one UCP staffer, who has maybe been taking runs at us for the last 2 weeks, the reason why they made the exemption for religious texts is because they don't want to violate anyone's charter rights. Meanwhile, Danielle Smith has said that she will consider using the notwithstanding clause to violate the charter rights of parents and youth seeking gender-affirming care. So forgive me if I'm a little skeptical on the charter rights argument. I think it might be a little bit more about playing to somebody's base. Nicolaides openly admits he hasn't read the books. And apparently also, he didn't read the ministerial order. Because if you take a look, he dated it at July 4th, Calgary, 2025. And this is the order that they chose to release publicly. We didn't FOIP this. This was in their package of, look at what a good job we've done. What we've laid out here is a factual presentation of the public information as to how these policies were developed. And this is where the communication strategy gets to be so important, because there's some distinct things that the government has done here. To start with, despite the fact that Nicolaides' own version that I played for you earlier, I met with some parents at this binder, it was very shocking, I did not like it one bit. Action for Canada, he loved it so much. Despite that, when Nicolaides was asked about this, the influence of Action for Canada, almost as if there were some bad optics involved, his response was, I'm unsure. I mean, they brought some materials to our attention, so that helped get a better understanding of the nature of materials that was available in school. But you know, this is a topic I've talked with many Albertans about. 5 emails. But let's get to the really insidious stuff. And to do that, let's start with the very basic fact. And it blows my mind that people have to keep repeating this. No one is advocating for kids being given access to materials that isn't age appropriate. No one's making that argument. Press secretaries for the government, the minister, and the premier herself have framed these book bans as a response to kindergarten kids viewing this material, even though Nicolaides is on record in multiple places saying that the government has absolutely no evidence of that ever happening, not once. It's not only disingenuous, it's profoundly manipulative. At best, the government has been able to identify some schools where these books were in libraries where a variety of ages attended. That doesn't mean kindergarten kids or grade 1 or grade 2 kids are accessing them. Let's be clear. If kindergarten students or elementary students are attending a library that is completely unsupervised by either a teacher or a librarian, something has gone very wrong, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what books are or aren't in that particular library. Teachers and librarians have extremely high levels of training, and we trust them to keep our kids safe 5 days a week. To suggest that kindergarten or grade 1 students are accessing these books unsupervised is an attack on teachers and librarians. Make no mistake about that. But of course, Daniel Smith and the UCP won't come out and say that directly. In no small part because undoubtedly they know that the what if, the unknown, is far more scary, even if it's not based in reality. But that didn't stop Smith from heavily implying it right after the consultation was announced.
Even family, we believe that parents have a right to choose the education for their kids. We believe that teachers should not be getting in between that relationship between kids and their parents. We believe as well that kids should be able to be kids.
Isn't that a fun game? We believe that teachers shouldn't be getting in between parents and kids. Not saying it's happening, it's just what we believe. I believe that Bruce McAllister's cocaine habit should be addressed with, if he's got one. I'm not saying that he does. I'm just saying if he did, he should be able to access treatment. Wasn't the only thing she said, though.
That's why we're taking pornography out of the schools, if you can believe it, that they have some of these terrible images that our young kids are seeing. We think that these kinds of values are really important to have.
If we were having an honest conversation, it would start with the question, do kids have the ability to access age-inappropriate materials in school libraries unsupervised? That's what an honest question would be to start this discussion. But that's not the question that we're being asked at all. In addition, Daniel Smith, Dimitris Nicolaides, and the religious zealots at Action for Canada have made it clear that their own determination that any books that explain explicit sexual content, regardless of the context, is completely inappropriate and offensive. And that simply isn't true. And the way that we can tell it simply isn't true is the exemption for religious texts. Because if it's harmful no matter what, it's harmful no matter what. If context and nuance change the merit of the material, which they do, then it changes. This is perhaps best illustrated by their insistence that if you can't show, this is the line they love, if you can't show the images in public on billboards or on the front page of newspapers, they're clearly inappropriate and have no place in schools. Again, they're half right, but all wrong. Because billboards and newspaper covers don't come with qualified teachers and qualified librarians to ensure that they're not being viewed by kids whom they're inappropriate for. We don't let kids buy cigarettes is another one of their half right, but all wrong arguments. Because we do let kids into convenience stores where the products that aren't age appropriate for them are gatekept by store employees, and usually ones making less than minimum wage, no less. But even the language that the UCP is using isn't based on reality.
I think that's a generally understood principle that we have in society, that we strive to achieve, that we don't show those kinds of images to young minor children. But I think that we look at this material that's completely inappropriate for minor children. And it says, don't show graphic sexual material to minor children.
But
This should not be available to minor children. Minor children should not be exposed to material that has graphic depictions of sexual acts. I'd love to hear from someone who can really articulate the value that it would provide to a young minor child. Do you support having books and other material that has really graphic depictions of sexual acts available to minor children?
What's a minor child? Like, seriously, that's a legitimate question that I went through and edited all of those clips together because it's very clearly a talking point. It's not, we're trying to keep this material away from children. We're trying to keep this material away from inappropriate age groups. We're trying to keep it away from minor children. You see, they're so small, they're not just children, they're minors. I'm going to walk slowly away from that hanger day. But it's a distinction without a difference. And the use of those two words together serves absolutely no purpose other than to utilize the they're so small, they're so young idea to strike more fear into people's hearts. Here's the problem. These policies aren't based on facts or evidence. They're based on nothing more than feelings. And when you have a government that is openly engaging in a communications strategy that is based entirely not on facts, but manipulating feelings, that's a government that already believes that it can redefine reality for Albertans, and it knows all the right fear buttons to press to do it. Again, no one is advocating for children, for kids being given access to materials that isn't age appropriate. Nobody's making that argument. What this debate is over is that what is age appropriate and who is qualified to make that determination. Should it be teachers and librarians who literally spend years being educated to make these determinations? Or should it be people that hold extreme religious beliefs that they want enforced on others in one hand, and an axe to grind because they couldn't accept that their kid was LGBTQ2S+, and instead blamed the education system for capturing them? Should it be politicians and policy advisors and press secretaries who have absolutely no training whatsoever in these fields? And they really don't like it when you point that out. Because if we start to allow politicians and people who have no expertise other than a divine conviction from their deity of choice what ideas can and can't be accessed, we're moving away from a functional democracy and stepping right into the first chapter of A Handmaid's Tale, 1984, or A Brave New World, all books which are ironically and perhaps deliberately now going to be banned under the government's new rules. And make no mistake, those books would be banned under the UCP's rules. Pretty much anything ever written by Stephen King would be banned under, there's that very uncomfortable section in the middle of it. At the end of the day, the UCP used a homophobic and transphobic reaction to 4 graphic novels to introduce sweeping changes to push books out of school libraries. But as some of those emails made clear, and as the folks from Action from Canada made clear, this is only intended to be a start. Here are some other facts that should be considered in this debate. According to the Children's Health Policy from the Simon Fraser University in 2024, suicide is the second leading cause of death in this country, behind only unintentional injuries for 15 to 19-year-olds, and the third leading cause for 10 to 14-year-olds. Suicide accounts for 25% of all deaths among 15 to 24-year-olds. According to a survey done by the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services in 2019, 1 in 3 Albertans, 34%, experienced sexual abuse while they were under the age of 18. The same study estimates that 325,000 Albertans under the age of 18 have experienced some type of sexual abuse. According to the Alberta Association of Sexual Assault Services, in 2012, of the 14,000 reported cases of sexual offenses against children and youth, 88% of all sexual offenses were committed by an individual known to the child youth, with only the remaining 12% committed by strangers. Of those known, 38% were family members, 44% were acquaintances of the child youth, and 6% were intimate partners of the youth. Survey results found that the following demographic groups have higher prevalence rates of sexual abuse compared to the overall rate for Alberta. People who are Indigenous at 66%. People who have diverse sexual orientations, 77%. People living with a disability, 49%. According to an AHS paper in 2023, over half of youth have had some form of sexual initiation by age 14. But God forbid that any of these demographics that I just finished listing off see themselves reflected in the books that are available to them. Fun twist. Birth rates and abortion rates are down, though, because education works. There has been no shortage. And I'm going to use a term here. I might get in a little bit of trouble for it. But it's anybody who's listened to the show, and I'm assuming everybody here has probably listened to at least 1 or 2 episodes, know that one of the themes that I've been personally exploring is the idea of privilege. And the idea that on the privilege hierarchy, I'm pretty much an apex predator. I'm a middle-aged white man with money and a job. I have no significant disabilities. I'm colorblind, but whatever. I'm the top of the pyramid. And it's very difficult for me to get into a place where I could in any way be perceived as speaking for any of the groups that are affected by these kinds of things. Because I care deeply about it, but I'm also fully aware that I have no real skin in this game. But I've been asked to. The number of people that have reached out over the last couple of weeks who have said, hey, these people that they're trotting out, who are members of the LGBTQ2S+ community, who are endorsing the anti-trans policies, who are endorsing the book bans. They're pick-me's. They're people who are so desperate for attention and proximity to power and influence that they'll do anything. They'll sell out their community. I don't have a platform to say that. Would you please say that? Which is a bonkers thing for an apex privileged person to hear. But I've started saying it because there's a lot of people who are way more vulnerable than I am, and they're asking me to say it. So absolutely, when we take a look at these press conferences and we see these pick-me's that are selling out the most vulnerable populations in Alberta, and you have to know there's going to be a press conference for the A stuff, and they're going to have some pick-me's for that who are going to come out and be like, oh, it's the best thing ever. Because they just want to be close. They just want to have their 5 minutes with Danny. These people who would sell themselves and their personal integrity for the proximity to power and influence are the last people who should have a voice in this conversation. And the fact that I get messages on the daily where people ask me to speak to it speaks to how low they actually are on who we should be listening to. We need to remember what this is about. It's about kids. It's about kids growing up and being able to see themselves reflected in the world around them. Because that woman from Action for Canada, who did the whole bit about my child was captured, you think any of these books are going to would have ever found their way into that home? You think that kid is going to be able to recognize certainly the emotional abuse that they were trying to navigate, but also the questions of identity? I've said it before, I will continue to say it. Schools have the opportunity to be cathedrals. They have the opportunity to be the places where we can move our society forward. They should not be the first in line for rollbacks when it comes to how ideas are accessed or exchanged. Those are my thoughts. I'm always open to the possibility that I could be very, very wrong about many things. So, with that being said, I am so excited to invite up to the stage these four people. Dr. Carla Peck, who I will continue to call Doctor, much to her chagrin, is a professor of social studies education in the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta. She's an adjunct professor in the Department of History, Classics, and Religion. She is the co-author. I couldn't believe this. I was writing her bio today. I have like 5 of them because she's been on the show because she's awesome. And I was like doing a quick little Google search to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And she's the title of the book that is coming out that she is a co-author of is called Rescuing Reason: How History Education Can Help Save Democracy. Jason Schilling. Was first elected president of the Alberta Teachers Association in 2019. It's now 25? Okay. Following 2 years of service as vice president, more than 8 years of service as a district representative for Alberta Southwest. Prior to his election, Schilling taught English and drama at Kate Andrews High School in Coaldale, where he worked for 17 years. And picked up, by the way, one of the coolest Twitter handles. If you can corner him after all this is done, ask him about his Twitter handle story, because it's awesome. Bradley LaFortune. Is a passionate community organizer, settler, and advocate for social justice, human rights, and the public interest. Born and raised on the prairies, he has spent the last 20 years in Edmonton. In the past, Bradley has worked with community organizations, labor unions, and advised leaders and politicians from all levels of government. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, not on this.
No, they haven't talked to me.
And the one I'm so excited for, I've had conversations with all of these people. They're absolutely lovely. They're amazing. And they're way smarter than I am. But there's a get here, folks, that I have been trying to get for a while now. And I just want to take a second to say this will be, clever little pun, dad jokes. I can't help myself. This will be her first appearance on a political talk show that's not her own. She has not been on any other political talk shows that are in Alberta right now. So. Lisa B. Who by the breakdowns measure is the #1 Alberta politics TikToker in the province. She's one of the reasons why we don't put any energy into TikTok. Because we won't be able to do it as good as her. And she's one of the hosts of Podcast is Broken with Steve Boots on the Ground Boots and Brittle Star. Lisa B. Okay, so, Carla.
Hi.
How much did I get wrong?
No, I don't think you got anything wrong.
Okay. What are your high-level thoughts on this? I know you just got back from like a really wonderful sabbatical.
Oh, yes.
And
yeah.
you came back to this, so sorry. But what are your thoughts on this? Because you've been an outspoken advocate for curriculum that has been developed properly, and this, to my measure, I'm no curriculum expert, that's why you're here, does not meet that bar. So the next 3 minutes are all yours.
Well, thanks for the invitation to be here with these fine folks and these fine folks. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Thanks for introducing me as a vocal advocate, because usually I'm introduced as a vocal critic of this government, which is accurate. And easy, that's right. So one thing that I would say off the top is just because a topic makes you uncomfortable doesn't give you the right to ban books about it. There is a scholar in the United States, Rudine Sims Bishop, who has written a foundational text that talks about the importance of books providing mirrors, windows, and sliding doors for children. Mirrors so they can see themselves reflected back to them in the stories that they encounter through books. Windows into lives and experiences that are different from theirs to expand their horizons, and sliding doors to give them experiences that they may not have sort of in their everyday lives. And she gives the example of, you know, what is it like to go to the dentist, or what is it like to do, you know, different things. And so sliding glass door is a way to kind of think about other experiences that they may not have in their own lives. And so I think when we start to ban books just because a topic makes us uncomfortable, then we are denying all children the right to see themselves in text, to learn about others who are reflected in those texts, even if it does not fit their own identity. They are learning about others whose identities those books might reflect. And it also opens that sliding glass door to invite children to think about what people's experiences might be, whatever sort of the life circumstances might be depicted in these texts. And representation matters. Representation matters. If children do not see themselves reflected in the materials that they encounter in schools, whether that's curriculum or storybooks or videos or whatever materials that are used in schools, then they grow up thinking, this place is not for me. I can never be X, Y, or Z. If they never see images of doctors who are people of color, or teachers who have a disability, or some sort of limb difference or something, then if they have those characteristics, they think, oh, I can't be that because I never see somebody like that in the books, in the curriculum, in the schools. And so it sort of creates a situation where they think those options aren't available to me. And I guess the last thing that I'll say before I pass it on or pass it back to you is, if this government truly cared about children and students, they would make sure that every school had a teacher librarian.
Before I move on to Mr. Schilling, I want to address the elephant in the room, because you're an expert in the things. Are the 14 plus age demographics, the 16 plus, the 15 plus, those are appropriate, right?
I mean, yeah, in general speaking, yes, every child is different. And so when you have a qualified, well-trained, tons of deep expertise teacher librarian in a school, they get to know the students in that school. And yes, a book may be appropriate for one 14-year-old and maybe not for another 14-year-old. And that's okay, because every child is unique and their development occurs to their own rhythm and pacing. And that's one of the reasons why having teacher librarians and teachers involved in this process, instead of right-wing hate groups making decisions about what should be in schools, to have actual experts involved and teacher librarians and teachers with time to be able to work with students to say, oh, what kinds of things are you interested in? And to create a trusting, caring relationship with students, then they can make recommendations based on how they've come to learn about what the student is interested in, what their developmental sort of stage is, and they can either steer kids away, maybe they're not quite ready for a particular book or a particular topic yet, or maybe they are, and they would know what are the sort of best books to introduce the kid who's questioning their identity or has curiosity about a particular topic, or whatever the situation might be. But if you strip schools of staff who have that expertise, who have the time and the possibility to actually develop those caring relationships with kids where they get to know them, get to know their interests and so on, then you can have confidence that they're making those recommendations both with their professional judgment, but also with the idea of, I care about this kid. I want them to be able to, grow in a good way and explore these ideas in a safe way. And so, this book might be more appropriate versus that book and this kind of thing. And so I don't think you can blanket say every book is going to be good for every kid, but it can be decided upon in consultation with the child, hopefully the family, if the families could be involved. In some cases, that's not a safe situation for a kid. The kid may not, let's say, they're questioning their identity. They have not been able to have that conversation with their family for any number of reasons. It might put them in danger, to be frank. And so school could be the safest place for that child to start exploring those ideas and having those conversations. And so you can't blanket say every book is good for every 14-year-old, but that's why having qualified professional staff, teachers, teacher librarians, and so on is so crucial to this equation, this question.
Mr. Schilling.
Yeah.
I think this is great news, because everything that I've heard about the education system is that it's funded appropriately, there's plenty of teachers, class sizes match. So, and there's no instability as we head into the new school year. So, right?
Well, yeah, and I guess, well, then my work's done. So thanks for coming up. No, first of all, thank you to everybody who is here. Thank you to the invitation. I felt like when I was sitting over here watching this, the slides that you put up there, that I could do a counterpoint to every point that was made, right? That is truth-based. Because a lot of what we heard or what you see there is fear-mongering, lies, and misrepresentation.
Are you talking about my stuff or their stuff?
No, that stuff on the screen. So, you know, go back to when I was just thinking about this, and I agree 100% with everything that Carla said. I don't want to repeat a lot of what she said, but if, just for example, in the province of Alberta, we have, I don't know the number of thousands of schools that we have. I was just trying to recall the number without Googling it, so somebody could do that for me. We have 10 teacher librarians in the province. 10. So the librarians across our schools are doing everything that they can to curate books that, as Carla said, represent the realities of students' lives in Alberta. And we know that students have colorful lives that are diverse. And, you know, some of the times you talk about students who might interest in books, or maybe it's, you know, something that has to do with 2S LGBTQ+. But they might not want to say anything to anybody but look at a book. They also have phones as well. We're not going to talk about that. But so you talk about sort of limiting the access to books that children have a right to. Children have the right to read. And of course, every teacher who works in this province, and I trust and will champion my colleagues till my dying breath, will choose age and grade appropriate books for their kids. I taught high school English for 17 years. I know what I can and cannot bring into my classrooms within my community, but I'm also going to bring things in. They're going to challenge my students in their thinking, because they need to develop critical thinking skills and not listen to garbage like you hear on the internet sometimes, like we saw here, and believe it to be true. And so that's really important that we have that work there. But as we're going through all of this, and one of the things that I'm hearing a lot from my members through the last couple of weeks is the fact that this will put a chilling effect on instruction in school. This will put a chilling effect on the books that I choose as an English teacher, or the literature or the text. And I'm a big proponent of graphic novels. It is an easy way for a lot of reluctant readers to get into literature and to start reading. And you're going to see a chilling effect on it. And I'm already hearing about it. I'm already hearing about teachers who are working their ways into their classrooms through the summer months and are starting to edit their own classroom libraries, because they're worried about what this means. They're worried about a resource challenge or a text challenge from a community member. They're worried about what that could look with the teaching commission. Could they get into trouble? And that's already having that effect. And this is at the detriment of the learning of children and of students. And I find it interesting as well when you've got the list of where these 4 books might have been found. And some of them are K-12 schools. So the library in that building has to reflect the fact that you have kindergarten students all the way up to grade 12 students. And they have to have a mix of things that are in this libraries. But if you ever go into the libraries, and I would challenge any UCP or NDP MLA, if they don't understand anything about education, to go to a school and learn about it. But if you go to the library, you'll see that the books are curated and inventoried in a way that are appropriate for the kids who are going to that section. So someone in kindergarten might get their hand on a copy of, I don't know if any library has it in it, by the way, but if they come up with like a Stephen King book the size of a phone book, and those phone books, for those of you who don't know, are big books that you send to right? They come in with one of those books. The librarian or the teacher is going to be like, no, that's not for you. Like, you're over here. So you have to put trust in the system, but by able to fan the flames of these sorts of things that you're seeing back here, you put mistrust into the system. And as we're talking about all of this library books and this and that, and you know, when we went to the press conference and you heard that, had not read the books, doesn't know where the books are in school, can't produce where the books are in schools, 5 emails. I mean, Saskatchewan had, all of their trans legislation that got passed 2 years ago was about 13 emails that came in complaint, right? So they're listening to a small majority who's getting a very loud voice in all of this. And what we're not talking about is the fact that we're the least funded school jurisdiction in all of Canada. So we can't have teacher librarians. We have the largest classrooms that my colleagues have ever seen. So they struggle to build these relationships that Carl is talking about. Right? When I had a class of 42 versus a class of 22, man, the way I taught those kids were so different. And the that class of 22 got a better version of me than the class of the 42. And that makes me feel sick every day when I leave work, right? So we're not talking about the lack of resources, supports for special need kids. We're not talking about the things that kids need in schools in order to be successful. They've got us talking about this. And this issue is important, right? We can't see, and you know, my dad is 77. You know, he's probably vote conservative all his life, but really likes Mark Carney right now for some reason. But when he talked about this, I mentioned it to him because my dad's always wanted to talk about politics. I've been lucky that way to grow up that way. He just says, well, that's just plain censorship. Like, just called it right for what it was, right from the get-go. Right? Yeah. And I mean, if you're losing my dad on this topic, then you're losing, right? So.
But like, this is, you've come on the show a few times, very generously, and the recurring theme has been classroom sizes. Teachers are overworked grossly. Teachers are underfunded. Classrooms are underfunded. The education system is in need of very serious repair. And I find myself wondering, given there's a little bit of a contract thing going on for you folks right now, is this not just a, oh look, dead cat, but also a, oh, see, this is why they're striking. This is why they're striking. It's because they want to show the kids this smut. Can you believe it? Can you even believe it? If you can believe it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm glad Lisa got that joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic. We've seen this from this government, the Kenney government, other governments that have. We're seeing it right now in the United States of America. We're going to do this over here while we're doing this over here. And you're going to be attracted over here while we're completely underfunding schools. Right? Well, we're not giving people the things that we need. The fact that we had hundreds of EAs laid off in June. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about 4 books that may or may not be in schools across Alberta, and they have no proof of who has ever read these books. And we're going to talk about this. In the meantime, we're doing this. And it's classic flood the zone, distractionary kind of tactics that we see from government. And it's imperative for all of us and your listeners and the people who care about this stuff to not get distracted by that and to not let that stuff divide us, right? Because it's designed to do the exact thing, divide us amongst this, to divide parents and teachers, to divide the community and teachers, to color teachers as people who, you know, do you remember Tory Tanner, the candidate from Lethbridge West? Sorry, I'll stop talking.
I do remember. I do remember Tory. I remember that there was a video that got leaked on the internet that caused her all kinds of problems.
So Tory Tanner makes a comment that she's running for the candidacy for the UCP for Lethbridge West, which is my riding provincially. The teachers are showing pornography in schools, which is not true. It is not true. It is a lie. And the government, the UCP party at the time, said, oh, she doesn't reflect our values. She cannot run for the party. We've had an about change here that I find very shocking, that we seem to be able to say these things that were considered lies and not our beliefs out loud now and actually make a ministerial order around it.
And you set me up perfectly for my pivot for the next 2.
You're welcome.
Can I just add one thing before
you
go
ahead.
Pivot? So it's not only classic flood the zone and distract, it's also classic break the system.
Yeah.
Underfund, tell people that teachers are showing pornographic materials to kids to create mistrust in the system, and that becomes the gateway to privatization. Yeah. And if we do not stand up and fight this, It is already on our doorstep. We see it in healthcare. They're trying to create mistrust and break the public education system. We cannot allow that to happen. And we all have to be vocal and be out on the streets and prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Amen.
This is where I'm excited to hear from Brad and Lisa. Because this is there's some, I'm going to use some language, there's some fuckery afoot. And
That sounds so poetic.
it's the afoot part at the end because context matters.
That's a pillow.
But there's games that are being played, and it's fascinating to me because I'll go back to the two press secretaries that have been chirping all week. They did a thing a little while ago where they were like, "Oh, the breakdown supports abusive comments," and it's like because somebody replied to something, and I'm sure they're probably not used to getting more than 4 replies on something that they post. It was probably a little foreign to them, but I responded with like, "Hey, man, I don't endorse that. I don't have a problem saying I don't endorse that. I don't approve of that. I don't have a problem saying that." It's a little disingenuous, though, for you to say, "Oh, they're supporting hate and they're not condemning hate." Hey, there's this guy coming to the legislature. Here's what he said about LGBTQ+ people. Would you be willing to condemn it? He's had 3 opportunities and he refuses to. And this is again part of the bad faith comms. And what I really want to hear from you, and then I'm so excited. What I want to hear from you is like what's the big picture for democracy here? What's the big picture for society here? Is this an erosion, do you think? Good question.
I love it. You just teed me up to talk about anything that I want to talk about. Thank you, Nate. I think the first thing that I'll say very quickly on these specific books is that for me, that's a reading list for me now, right? Like, and if you haven't read Blankets, it's a life-changing story about coming of age and coming into your own, about your own belief system and coming through hard things like abuse, and not knowing who you are and finding out who you are through trials and tribulations. And it's beautiful, and it's probably saved a lot of lives. It probably saved mine. So read that book. It's fantastic. It should be in schools, available to children where age appropriate. I would say that the first thing that we need to do as a province, as advocates in our own communities and more together, is to call out this government for what it is. This is not your parents' PC party, right? Obviously, we know that. That was 10 years ago. This is not a united conservative party. This is an authoritarian populist party that is taking their playbook from Trump and the Republicans in the United States. And so I think that it's very important that we use common language and we invite people in and we're careful about, talking to our dads sometimes and we find common ground. My dad's here, by the way. But it is important to call it for what it is. And that's why I think, when we talk about democracy, who they come for first? The most vulnerable, okay? I identify with he, they pronouns. I'm gender fluid. And I use those pronouns because that's who I am. And I also use them because it fucks with the UCP on the internet. They hate that. They hate it. But when we talk about what we're up against, we're talking about a very flood the zone, urgent, very aggressive authoritarian government that is trying to decimate healthcare, education, social services before we even know what to do about it. So we need to save the province from leaving the country. Thank you, Thomas, for doing that. And at the same time, we need to organize together to build and strengthen the things that we know matter to children, to students, to all of our communities, and that is public health care and public education that is there when you need it for every single Albertan, not just those with the ability to pay, and make sure that we're calling out this government every step of the way, and also, I would say, having a little bit of fun doing it. So that's important too. So I'll leave it at that.
No, that's good. My pronouns on Twitter are he, him, that fucking guy, and it drives them crazy. It's so much fun. The pronoun piece is fascinating to me because it costs you nothing. It costs you nothing. It diminishes nothing. And yet, that is the thing that they go, oh, pronouns in the bio, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm like, that comment makes it so I have to listen to you, so we're having a good day. But the authoritarian piece, the authoritarian populism piece, it's really easy for people to hear that and go, oh, he's being hyperbolic.
Sure.
I want to just, before I get to Lisa, I want to highlight, it's not just Bradley that's saying that. A year and a half ago, I had on 3 of the leading political scientists in the province of Alberta. These are not people with big black hats. These are people who have credentials. These are people who have experience. They have bodies of work. They are credible. And when each of those 3 people said on the show, yes, there is a creeping fascism in Alberta, I don't know what else there is to say. When the expert, like, if I go to see a doctor and he says, oh, you got a nail in your foot. Well, I guess I have a nail in my foot. If the experts are saying it, then it needs to be listened to. So it's not hyperbolic to say that Danielle Smith is an authoritarian. It's not. Because again, and this is where I go back to the notwithstanding clause bullshit. The notwithstanding clause exists only to remove people's charter rights, period. You can't use it on pipelines, you can't use it on equalization payments, it's not what it is. It exists only to limit people's charter rights. And Danielle Smith has said on the record multiple times that she will exercise it to punch down on trans youth. I can think of no better definition of an authoritarian than that. So, I agree with you 100%. And there's smart people who agree with both of us, so we're doing well.
Perfect.
Lisa.
Hello.
I know almost nothing about you.
I know.
I've gone out of my way to make sure that I don't know anything about you because you want to keep it that way, and I have absolutely no issue with that. But I do know that the commentary that you provide on the dumpster fire, amazing. It is second to none. And so I'm curious, what are your thoughts on my little presentation?
Danny. I mean, I agree with your presentation. Obviously, we have a lot of the same ideas. I think what this province needs to remember, the UCP, Danny, the people pulling her strings, Sandra, whose son was captured. Gay kids have always existed, non-binary kids have always existed, and trans kids have always existed. And the goal of a civilized society is to make sure that those children get to adulthood. And so it doesn't matter what you do with books, although I find it funny that Nicolaides has no problem with violence. Like, we can throw violence at them all day, every day, but don't talk about boys kissing boys. That's just awful. But the point is, like you said, it all intertwines, and they are actually quite smart about how they do it. I know when Danny was up on the screen, everyone's like, rah, rah, rah. No, you got to keep that energy, right? Like, we have to listen to everything she says, everything her ministers say, because the words that they're saying, you cannot take at face value. You have to think of the messaging behind that and how it intertwines with everything. So it has to do with starting with these books and banning books, and no, it's just these books, but I would like to know what schools these were in. I would like to know where these books were located on the shelves, because I believe that they were planted, allegedly, just my thought. But it has to do with that. It has to do with trans rights for youth. in Alberta, like everything is intertwined. The separation discussion, it's not her, it's other people, but it is her, because she is the face of all these other people that are standing behind her, making her do all these things that are going to cause harm to children, may not allow them to get to adulthood. So she can't just say, I don't believe in separation, but I'm just going to make laws easier for people to separate. You can't say, I have a family member who is part of the 2S LGBTQ community, but I'm going to make policy that's going to impact children negatively, right? Like, we have to keep pushing. We have to listen to the message behind the message. And we have to keep our anger. And we have to direct it in an appropriate way to make sure that this bitch does not get in the next time we have an election. And I'll leave it at that.
The messaging behind the messaging piece is really interesting to me, because that's something that we've spent a bit of time on our show, trying to dissect a little bit. And the brazen way in which they'll just lie. They'll just lie. And I mean, Bruce McAllister's a really easy punching bag right now. I've had a long day, so I'll use that punching bag. But they played the immigration video. The immigration video says, it's the unchecked open border policies that have caused the problems with our schools. It's not underfunding for decades. It's the unchecked immigration that's caused the problems with our healthcare system. It's not underfunding for decades. It's unchecked immigration that's caused the problems in housing. And some individual, I don't know who it was because they didn't show him on camera for some reason, some individual stood up and said, I don't think that's productive. I think that's offensive, that you would blame all of these problems on immigrants. And Bruce McAllister, the moderator, the first part of that word I think escaped him, the moderator says, I think you're disgusting.
Yeah.
And then the cherry on the top, because you can't make this shit up in this province, the cherry on the top was the very next morning. They issued a statement saying, it is the immigrants.
Oh my God.
And but that's the challenge, is that Danielle Smith's strength, and as a communicator, because you're very good at what you do, Danielle Smith's strength is she communicates very, very well to people. She makes them feel heard. But she also will say whatever in the moment. There's no principle. There's no consistency. There's no integrity. How do you counteract that messaging? How do you call out that bullshit?
The thing that I hate the most about Danny is that she is such a good speaker. And she can captivate a room, and she speaks with authority, and so whatever garbage is coming out of her mouth, people go, yeah, it's a good idea, right? And she counts on people not doing research. She counts on people just taking what she's saying and going, well, that must be it, because we elected this person, and she must be doing things that are in the best interest of all Albertans. No, that's not happening. But I think for a lot of us, and hopefully everybody in this room, when the government puts out policy, when the government has a presser, when Danny's talking about something, we're trying to break down that messaging, because it's not just what's at face value. There's so much more behind it. And I think a lot of her base, we don't do research crowd, they do take it at face value. And so that's why they get in such a ruckus when, God forbid we use a pronoun, because they don't understand that they do have pronouns, because they, But those are the kinds of things that we have to keep challenging, and we have to keep pushing, and we have to keep talking about. And, you can do it in a multitude of ways. I do it in a little bit more of a aggressive, I guess, way, hopefully educated. But if you're talking to your neighbor, you have to talk to the people where they're at, right? And so if your neighbor is a staunch conservative, or whatever the hell this is now, you may not want to start yelling and swearing and throwing your lawnmower at them, but you want to talk about things that will get people to have the open dialogue. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to do. Or else we're just going to end up in this again, and we can't afford that.
And I'm going to have somebody on in a bit who I think will attest to the fact that this is not a conservative government. It's not. Kind of like acetaminophen is in Tylenol.
Booyah!
Well, here's the thing. We've been teasing something on the show, and yes, there is something coming. It's going to be in 3 parts because it's that ridiculous, because one of the things that we've learned as we mine this bullshit mountain is there's always more. There's no bottom. You'll get to the thing and you'll be like, oh, that's got to be it. And then you throw another shovel and you're like, damn it. So there is. The rules of engagement for me have changed. I now have to journalist when I'm journalisting. And so I'm waiting to hear back comment from like 6 press secretaries and some other folks. But there will be a story coming next Friday that they're going to love me for, I'm sure. So I was going to open with this, but if there's anybody in the room who wants to serve me papers, if we could just get that done now.
Okay.
Maybe it's one of those notice of liabilities.
That's
from
right.
Action for Canada.
With a binder.
Yes,
with a
I
binder.
have 12 of them.
I'm actually surprised that one of your slides they use an AHS chart because they don't like the AHS. AHS doesn't know what they're doing. So
Oh,
I
no,
don't know why
that
these
wasn't them. The
Yeah,
AHS study was us. That was
Oh.
but it really is, and all of you have spoken about this. The stakes are that high. They are that high, and my personal source of infuriation on this whole issue is that you have these pick-me's who should know all too well how high the stakes are from personal, first-hand, lived experience, and they just don't fucking care. And it makes me crazy. It makes me absolutely crazy. And there's a line that I used a while ago. I try not to use it too often because I get upset. I think everybody here knows what I do for a living. Once you fucking cut down a dead kid, then we can have this conversation. Until then.
No, I've said time and time again, when we create policies as adults that fail children, and children will die because of some of this, then we've failed them. And that's why you need to push back on that. Yeah. So I agree with that 100%.
Can I jump in there on something?
Yeah.
So one of the things so speaking of press secretaries, I used to work for the NDP government, and I worked with a really fantastic press secretary, very good friend, and he was amazing, but he had this little post-it above his computer that said, "Facts don't fix feelings." Every time he wrote a press release, that was there. And I think that, what you were talking about, when it comes to anger, we need to know how to channel it. It needs to be righteous. It needs to be in defense of the most vulnerable and the things that we can imagine being true and possible in this province. So there's qualifications to it. But we're all feeling angry and frustrated and also tired and very, very sometimes sad because of the things that we have to deal with in our workplace. That's okay, and that can be very, very productive. I think that that's something that we don't want to lose, but we need more voices, and that's the other piece. I mean, I run my mouth all the time to the point where I don't even know if I listen to myself anymore, to be honest with you. No, but people know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that democracy is broken. It's been broken by the UCP. We can have nice things in this province if we elect governments that actually invest in them when it comes to education, healthcare, and social services. It's not that hard. They're breaking it on purpose. But when you hear from people from the front lines, and people with direct experience, family members who have, they're caring for people on AISH, and they're really worried about what ADAP is going to mean for them, that really gives license to more and more people to stand up and tell their stories, because we're talking about reading and windows into the world tonight. And the thing is that Alberta is much more than Daniel Smith is trying to say that it is, right? It's about all of us, and we need to stand up and share those stories.
And I think I'm going to come back into another run at all, but the anger piece is so important. I mean, I come from a punk rock background. Henry Rollins, he's very short, but he's awesome. And he has a bit that he took to the Middle East 15 years ago, where he said, all of the people that came before you have failed. And they failed because they weren't angry enough in the right way. And it's easy to get tired and it's easy to get frustrated, but you have to find that last little ember of rage and use that to keep you fueled through the long, dark nights, because if you give up, they win. So I, 100%, man.
And you also need to do it in community.
Yes.
Yeah. Trying to do this on your own just is further exhausting and demoralizing sometimes. And so that's why it's important to have your peeps around you, right? And work together.
And that's why I'm so grateful for all of you. And I know I've said that a couple times already, but I honestly, sincerely do mean it. The DMs that we get from you guys, the messages that we get from you guys, the support that we get from you guys in a variety of different ways, that says, keep going. And I recognize that there's some folks that they don't have the resources to be able to keep going in the way that the breakdown does, but we're only able to do it because of you guys. So again, Carla's 100% right, the community and the support, acknowledging other people, and not testing, the gatekeeping. One of the things that I find so fascinating about conservatives is you can have two conservatives who on 99% of issues hate each other. They completely disagree. But if there's one thing that they can get together on, they will get together on that one thing. And progressives historically go, wait, we only agree on 99%? And nothing gets done. Dr. Pack.
See?
What needs to happen in your view? And to my shock, there are youth who listen to this program, who watch this program. And it is, the community piece is a beautiful bridge. So I'm going to run right over it. What is your message to Albertans writ large? And what is your message to the kids who are feeling yet again that they are being punched down on by a government that is supposed to be protecting them?
Where to start? I want to come back to this idea of that Jason talked about, that this policy is putting a chill already on what's happening and will be happening this fall in classrooms, because there's a deadline, I think, of October 1st, where people have had to go through the libraries, and I think classroom teachers are looking at their own classroom libraries too, even if it's not the school library. And what I would say, I completely agree that this is going to put a chill on what happens and make teachers afraid to talk about certain topics, to use certain books in their classrooms. And that chill is going to be felt by students, by every single student, whether that student identifies as part of the LGBTQS+ community or not. Everybody's going to feel that chill. But especially, I want to say to members of the LGBTQ2S+ community, and especially students, I know that that chill that is being caused by our government is going to make you feel afraid. Yeah. It's going to make you feel like school is not a safe place to be, because suddenly being curious about a topic, asking questions about a topic, wanting to explore through books and learn about a topic, you're being told that that's wrong. And that you are somehow wrong, that you are somehow faulty or defective. And that is the most offensive thing about this, because you are beautiful and you are made the way you are made, and you deserve to feel safe, you deserve to feel loved, and you deserve to live the life how you are true in your true self. And I just think that is the most disgusting thing about all of this, is the potential harm that this policy is going to do to kids and to the families of those kids. And so I think that what we need to do is we need to just keep being vocal. Those of us, I'm like you, except for, I mean, other than not being male, I've got every piece of privilege going. I'm white, I'm able-bodied, I'm heterosexual, I've got, you know, good job, all those sorts of things. And so through my ally work, trying to make sure that I can speak up, not for people, but with people who need that allied support. And I think that all of us, if we have that capacity, and if it's safe for us to do so, it's not always safe for folks to speak out, but if it is, then I think we need to use our voice and use our power in a way that speaks truth to power every single time it is called into question, and we need to challenge that power and say, this is not okay. This is not the Alberta or the Canada I want to live in, where certain communities, whatever those might be, are being told you're less than, or we can't have books about you in schools, or we're not allowed to talk about these things. That is not the kind of province or country that I want to live in.
Mr. Schilling, same question.
Well, I just want to say what Carla said and just move on, because I agree 100% with everything that she just said. The one thing I would say to us LGBTQ plus students and my colleagues who are out there, that more people care about them than the hate that they see in the social media. But man, is it hard to look past that wall of hate, to see the hundreds of thousands of people who support them behind them, right? The ones who are supporting the kids, not the hatred, right? In case that came out wrong. But I think what's imperative, and I worry a lot about what's going to happen in the fall for a variety of reasons, the things of underfunding, but Bill 27 is coming into effect. This will have a chilling effect, not only on teachers, but also students. It already has. Just the announcement, it wasn't this year, it was last year, that video, that little 9-minute video that came out on Twitter that said this legislation is coming, already put a chill on that. Already had 2S LGBTQ plus trans kids step back from their communities within their schools because they were afraid. And nobody deserves to live in the shadows of their lives. Nobody. So, as we move forward into this fall, what we need is all of that quiet support that is out there for particularly our most vulnerable, those who might be on AISH, into other areas, into healthcare, people who are caught up in the healthcare system when they need support. Those quiet supportive voices need to get loud. They need to speak up. They need to find community organizers within their areas. They need to join a political party that has good ideas and good values. They need to go to protests. They need to go door knocking. They need to do all of these things because this is where we live and this is our province. And I agree with Carla. This is not what I want to live in. It's not what I foresee being the correct path forward.
I'm going to shoehorn in a really awkward question because I was specifically requested to ask you this question. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old at home, and they want to know, do they have to go to school or is there going to be a strike?
I think if they have a little time off this fall, that they should be at their MLA offices as well. And you and I talked about this before. One of the things that we don't talk about is we don't ask kids what they think, right? And they're left out of this conversation. So I mean, I remember we were talking about one of the podcasts. You're like, you're one of your child. I'm a good English teacher, thank you. One of your children was, mad about something. I'm like, get into that MLA office because those kids are going to vote one day.
Mm-hmm. I'm very fortunate. Both of my kids, when they heard about the parental requirement for pronouns changes, their immediate reaction was, I'm going to change my name to Tractor one day, and the next day it's going to be Stapler, and I'm going to crash the system. And so, love the sentiment, but both my wife and I were like, that's going to make a lot of work for the teachers, and they're already so burdened.
I love the enthusiasm. I don't love the paperwork.
Yeah, exactly.
We routinely make policy about children and not with children. And so that's another thing that we can do is we can make sure children's voices are more routinely at the table, whether we're developing curriculum, whether we're developing policy about library books, whatever. Children are not citizens in waiting, they are citizens now, and they deserve to have a voice, and they deserve to have a say in what their lives are like now and into the future.
Bradley?
Well, Carla and Jason stole the words out of my mouth, so I'm going to try new ones here. But I think when it comes to what I would say to vulnerable youth in our school system, I would ask them what they wanted to say. And I'm reminded of a story that a friend who is a little bit younger than me, but they work a lot with youth who have experienced various forms of trauma and are generally, facing a lot of barriers. And what they said to me is that in response to me worrying, pulling my hair out about what we're gonna do, like how to save the kids, they're gonna be really, really, really more and more at risk. And this government's coming for them. And they said, well, maybe we should have a conversation with those kids that you're worried about and ask them what they're doing already to create community, as Carla said, and safety, and thinking about how they're building the world within this world that isn't safe because of this provincial government, and listen, and just listen, right? Yeah. Start there.
Thank you. Lisa, you got a platform, and I know that you think you're angry in how you communicate. But the empathy that you exude through the little phone screens is truly remarkable. And I know that there are a lot of kids who do consume your content. There's a lot of kids who, I talk to people, and there's a few folks who are like, wait, you're getting her? So you're reaching the youngins. Wrap it up for us.
No pressure. I think it's important for people to be a safe place. Be a safe place for kids, be a safe place for other adults. If you don't know something, find the resources to get more information. I think that sense of community is really important. It's really easy, like, my house has a political corner. I have every damn sign that I could have in that political corner. I have union signs, I have education signs, I have all the signs. So if anybody's walking past my house and they have a question, they know that my house is a safe place. And it's easy to do. You can wear a pin, there's tons of stuff that you can do, but somebody walking past you, they go, okay, I can go to them. They may not be able to go to their parent, despite the UCP wanting to out children to their parents. They may be part of a church. Like, there's a lot of stuff that kids are going through that we don't know. And growing up now is way different than growing up when we all grew up, right? Like, there's so much access to a lot of good information, and there's so much more access to hate. Yeah. And so it's important to let the kids know, and the parents, that we are there to support them. And get loud. Get loud. If it's safe for you to do so, get loud.
that's the last thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because and we're not done. I got Thomas over here. He's probably watching the clock going, what the hell is this guy doing? But the last thing that I wanted to get your thoughts, the folks who are propping up this government, they get loud at the drop of the dumbest thing possible. The outrage over the guy who's coming. There's a thing, you can go to the protest next weekend, for goodness sakes.
6 p.m.
There you go. But that's an example, because like this is a guy who his own ministry groups have said he's as crooked as all hell. He's ripping everybody off. And this is who the Alberta legislature goes, would you like a permit, sir? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So progressives, centrists, whatever, anybody who's not batshit crazy, has a tendency to hold back. And what would you say, because my personal thought is enough's enough. I'm putting on the metaphorical knuckle dusters and let's fucking go.
Hell yeah.
But again, peak privilege over here, so it's a bit easier for me. What would you say to people who are hesitant? I'm gonna come back to this sound
like it's not. I mean, it's not an easy thing, right? Like it's not. You have to find something that you're most passionate about and start there, right? And whether that's something that affects your family, your community, what have you, start there, and it will grow, right? I mean, I think when I started making videos, it was like, COVID vaccines are good, and now look at where it's gone, right? Thank you, government of Alberta. But that's the thing. I mean, everybody has a passion about something. And other people have the same passion that you have. It may look a little different, but it just takes one person to make a move. You did it. Look at all of us listening to you every week.
Now that I'm uncomfortable, Brad.
Yeah, I'll take over. That's awkward. No, it's you guys are exactly the model for it, right? You have to start somewhere. I went to school here, and I was on this stage, and I was in a play called Titanic. I won't tell you what happens at the end, but I played a young Irishman, and I won't tell you what happened to me either. But the reason I bring that up is that I wrote to a professor, or an instructor. His name's Ken Brown. If you know Ken Brown, he's a wonderful teacher and thespian, and he's a good friend. And I wrote him. I was like, I want to write a play. I don't know how to write a play. How do I write a play? And he was like, fucking write, Brad. Which is kind of funny, and I cried when I got that email. But you start small. You find what you care about. And I would also say, like in our work at Public Interest Alberta, what I find with folks who are doing work already and they bring someone in who's brand new is that we have a lot to learn from what that new person is already doing in their community. And that when we come together and we build something even bigger and stronger, there's something about that, whole thing that the sum is greater than the parts when it comes to advocacy. Advocacy is for everyone. So if you're sitting there thinking, what else can I do? Don't feel guilty. You're probably doing a lot more than anyone should be asked to do, that we should have to do in this province right now. And if you want to do a little bit more, you can join Public Interest Alberta, go to our website. But seriously, just take that baby step and go from there. And we do, if you feel safe, if you are safe, recognizing that everyone is doing what they can, and you need to consider, your limitations. Those are very real, and I'm glad that Nate, you brought that up tonight, talking about privilege. Recognizing that you actually have a whole bunch of people who will be behind you and stand with you if you put that marker out there, and ask people to come with you. So invite people in and start something or join something, but there's a lot more of us than there are of Daniel Smith's press secretaries and her base.
Boy, did they learn that this week.
And they're actually not, they're not undefeatable, right? That we're seeing the ability for people to come together and organize in ways that 2 years ago I was really worried about not happening in this province. And we see that with Forever Canada. We also see that with different labor groups. And I want to shout out the ATA right now because they're in a really tough round of negotiations. And also, if there's any EAs or office staff in the room today, what you did, QP workers across the province, was the most inspiring labor action that I've ever had the chance of witnessing. And you broke the mandate, right? And so it can be done. That's the other thing too, is it's not impossible to make change happen. You just have to get out there, organize, and keep at it.
Mr. Schilling, you lead a labor organization. You part of your job is getting people motivated.
Yeah, and I would just say ditto, and maybe add to the fact that, you know, when every year when I start my classroom with my students, I draw a big circle on the board, and I write in the middle, comfort zone. This is where you are. You're in your comfort zone. I'm going to push you to this dot over here that's outside of your comfort zone, because that's what school should be. Because we get comfortable in our lives, and it's easy to say, well, that's not my kid, that's not my, you know, whatever it is, whatever the issue is. But we need to get, as we advocate and push and move forward, and I say this to members all the time, you need to move out of that comfort zone. And we often, and I got some of my colleagues here, and they'll know, we'll talk about the ladder of escalation, right? So maybe you're willing to send an email, okay? What's next? And then you move up these steps, and then you build community, you build these networks, you put out a lawn sign. Because I know some people who won't put out lawn signs. They live in small, conservative little towns, and they're worried about what could happen. But there's other things that they can do. I heard of a story when the Premier was running in the by-election in Medicine Hat Brooks. People who lived in Brooks bused to Medicine Hat to door knock. So they weren't knocking on their neighbors' doors, and vice versa. So it's just moving out of that comfort zone and then moving up that escalation and finding, where can I get involved, what can I do, what's next, and then not get complacent, because it's easy to do that. Because advocacy work, this work, is exhausting, right? It's marathon running. It's not sprints. And you just have to keep that in mind, that you get little setbacks, you get little blowbacks on things. Happens all the time, right? But somehow we have to find a way to make that sort of 20% that is so loud right now, where the other 80% are not, and flip those numbers around.
So like Jason, I grew up in a home where we talked politics and news all the time. So I've always was politically aware. I wasn't always politically active. And then the UCP launched the most horrendous social studies curriculum I had ever seen in my life. And I literally could not keep quiet about it. There was no way to stifle what was going on inside my head. So I started speaking out about it. And so everybody's going to find their own thing that ignites that desire to fight for the common good in our society. And that fight doesn't have to be as public as my fight has been. I think that year that the curriculum dropped, I did over 100 media interviews, among lots of other things. That's not for everybody. So change can happen in lots of ways. And it can be incremental. It most often is incremental rather than sort of drastic change. And it builds, and it builds, and it builds. And I think that we need to support one another to find the way that we can each contribute to making that positive change in our community. For some folks, it might be working a phone bank and sending emails. For other folks, it might be getting out in the public eye. For other folks, it might be running for office. organizing a petition. And Thomas, you've done a few of these things, right? Run for office, been in office. And so for me, it comes back to community, that to not do this in isolation, to find who our, and others have said this, to find who our networks are, who our community are, because that community acts as a scaffold. So that when one of us is said, I can't do this anymore, I've got to take my foot off the gas, we know we've got the scaffold of the other people around us to keep us with the group, to keep us with being able to fight for whatever it is that we're fighting for. And the other thing that I would say, and I think, Nate, this goes back to something you said earlier, we can't be sort of judgy and say, oh, you're not doing it the right way. You know, everybody's going to have, find their own way to make change, find their own way to contribute. And just because that's not the way I would do something, or it's not the way, you know, an organized political party would do something, or what, that doesn't mean it's the wrong way. It might be the right way for that person. And so we've got to recognize and support and amplify the change. And we've also got to be the scaffold and support for one another, because for our own mental health, sometimes you do need to step back and say, okay, I'm not going on blue sky for a week because I just can't take it anymore, or I'm not going to speak out about something because I just need a little break. That doesn't mean that person is completely disengaged. It just means they've had their foot on the gas for too long and they need somebody else to step to the forefront for a little bit so that they can kind of catch their breath. So we need to be in community, we need to work with one another, we need to support one another, we need to not judge one another because, you know, somebody you might perceive you're not doing it in the way I would do it, kind of thing. There's multiple ways to affect change in society, and I think we need to tap into all of those ways to have the most effect.
I thought blue sky was the good place.
Oh, it is, but sometimes you still need a break.
Okay, because like I'm used to Twitter. That's where I hang out, and like blue sky's like, oh, nobody's saying horrible things over here. This is delightful.
No, it's pretty good, but sometimes you just need to step back.
That's fair. Yeah. I want to thank all of you so much for coming up and sharing this stuff tonight. In typical breakdown fashion, we've gone well over time. We're going to continue to go well over time, but I planned on this, and the very nice man up in the booth up there said that we can go a little bit later. So, for anybody who is able to, if you're able to hang out a little bit, we're going to do sort of a Q&A at the end. So there's that. If you're able to, that would be great. If you have to be places, I have screwed with your schedule, so I totally understand it. The one thing that I do want to say, to wrap up what the four of you said there, there's a famous comedian that I'm very fond of, and there's a quote that he kind of took to the next level. The quote is, the moral arc of history bends towards justice. The way that he modified it, which I think is okay, is he said the moral arc of history bends towards justice, but only because there are a lot of people who are applying pressure to make sure that it does. And I don't resent Jon Stewart at all for coming out of retirement to steal my format. Thank you all so much. For everybody out there, if you need to use the washroom, just do. We're going to take a minute to reset some things, and then I'm so excited to bring up Mr. the Honorable, I caught myself, Thomas Lukaszuk, to have a conversation, because I don't want to leave this conversation in, everything's terrible and you should do something. We're going to give you some tangible things to do. So give us a couple minutes and we'll do that. Thank you so much. Thank you. How's it going?
Good.
Good.
I think it's going well. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I got a couple things I want to ask you about. So first of all, we've had a conversation recently about what sort of inspired you to do the petition, and to, boy, you made those separatists sure angry you did. And I find the timing of this conversation particularly good because, well, there was a court thing that happened too. So I'm going to ask you to start by talking about the court thing.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for having me. And before I start that, if there's one person that earned our official T-shirt, it is you. So let me present you first with the T-shirt. There you go.
Thank you very much.
This court case is really bizarre. And it is bizarre from the perspective that, the very fundamental pillar of democracy is to have a body that is not in any way affected or dependent on government, that it's totally separate from government, that organizes elections or referenda or petitions, and that's Elections Alberta. And we happen to have a chief electoral commission right now who truly believes in the fact that his office has to be independent. Now, Jason Kenney, when he was a premier, and when there was issues, with vaccinations and masks and everything, in his sort of populist way, he thought he will pass a piece of legislation known as the Citizens Initiative Act, giving people the power. You create your own laws, and if you get enough signatures, we will then adopt the law. And Danielle Smith, with Bill 54, just a couple of months ago, amended this law, and it was supposed to make things easier on separatists. So she lowered the threshold on the number of signatures from, in Alberta, nearly 300,000 to about 170,000. She extended the time from 90 days to 120 days. And equally importantly, she really took off the restraints on fundraising, so they can raise virtually as much money from wherever they want. But she didn't proclaim this law until the day after I filed my petition, because she didn't expect anybody else to file a petition. So she sort of, got outplayed a little bit on that. But one of the changes that she made in that piece of legislation was that if ever chief electoral officer receives a question that is to be put on a ballot, and he or she may think that this question is unconstitutional, simply violates the charter, then he or she may defer that question to the Court of King's Bench, what's known as a reference decision, and have the court decide whether the question is or isn't constitutional or unconstitutional. And so when separatists, following my petition, filed their question, and when he reviewed it, and rightfully so in my humble opinion, he thought this question just may be unconstitutional. And he was worried about several things. Number one, obviously treaties. As we know, treaties in Canada, yes, treaties in Canada are signed with the Crown, not with Ottawa even, and they supersede the Constitution. And our treaties are not bound by provincial borders. They stretch across several provinces and territories. So that was his number one concern. Other concerns include the fact, such as mobility of labor, for example, our own mobility, and many others. So he, in his wisdom, thought that he should refer it to court, to which our Minister of Justice and our Premier objected, and directed him to not defer it to court, but simply adopt that question and let the separatists run with the question. And he, and kudos to him, said no. He stood up to the Premier and the Minister of Justice, and he took it to court. There was a court case, a court hearing, I should say, and the Justice of the Court of King's Bench decided that he believes that there are issues with that question. And he is going to explore it now. But before he rules on whether it is or isn't, that question is or isn't constitutional, he wants to hear from stakeholders. In law, they're called interveners. So First Nations and others will have a chance to speak to that question and argue why, if that question was to go forward and succeed, why it would infringe on treaty rights, human rights, and other rights that we have. So, in that court case, justice prevailed, democracy prevailed, and most importantly, the independence of our chief electoral officer prevailed. So it was a big win for all of us Albertans.
I think one of the things that's striking about the court case is the number of First Nations folks who have said, "Oh no, 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 no." There's a lot of First Nations folks. There's a couple of statements that came out just today and yesterday, where they were like, "No, this is not okay. We reject all of this," and it's fascinating to me that Danielle Smith, Mickey Amory. I'm just going to hover on that for a second, have taken the position that, oh no, we're super supportive of First Nations and Indigenous and Métis folks, just as long as you do exactly what we want, and otherwise we're going to kind of ignore you, which is, to my understanding, not in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. I could be wrong. Why do you think it is that Danielle Smith and the government even took a position? Because to me, this seems like the easiest, let it go. Let the black hat gang go and whatever they do. And just be like, okay, we're going to let the process go. We're not going to mess with it. If the chief electoral officer wants to be independent, which we want him to be because integrity of democracy and all of that, we're going to get out of the way instead of going, I know better.
This is politics. This is all about politics. I can't say much about Minister of Justice Mickey Amory. Judging by his age, he obviously cannot be a seasoned lawyer. But I can tell you, that in the Ministry of Justice, in the bureaucracy of justice, there are some phenomenal lawyers. And I can tell you, as a minister in numerous portfolios, if you're smart, you rely on those experts. And they usually give you very good advice. Now then, as an elected official, you sometimes modify that advice to make it palatable to the public or to your platform or to your ideology. But at the end of the day, they know what they're doing. They have been in that ministry for a long time. And I can assure everybody that there is no way that there was one lawyer in the Ministry of Justice who would have told the Premier or the Minister of Justice that he should object to the Elections Commissioner's ability and willingness to transfer that separatist question to the court, because they knew that simply that is the right that he has, and actually that is the right thing to do. But this is politics. And often, as you know, politics and common sense, clash. Danielle Smith has a problem. Danielle Smith has a political problem because, judging by what we're doing right now, collecting petition signatures and talking to Albertans everywhere across the province, I am now convinced that there are about 10% of Albertans who are actually very serious about separation. And if you were to give them a chance to sign off on the dotted line and separate, they would do it right now. Now, they are subdivided. That 10% is subdivided. Some want to create a separate country, and some want to join the United States. Now, on top of that 10%, there is another 10% of people who are simply intrigued by the concept of separation. They want to learn about it more, and they think that it could be a good bargaining tool to bargain with Ottawa or other provinces. But if you were to actually say, would you sign today to separate, they probably would not. The remaining 80% of the severely normal want nothing to do with separation. However, if you look at Danielle Smith's UCP caucus, and particularly her political base, those numbers are different. There could be up to 30% of UCP members who would consider separation, and in her caucus, I believe she has up to 14 MLAs, and some of whom are cabinet ministers who are pro-separation. So when you do the math, if she was to lose, 15, 20, 30% of her political base, or 14 MLAs in her caucus, she loses majority, and she no longer can hold government, but she would also lose the next election, because there are many ridings where she won by fewer than, several hundred votes. So she is doing this dance right now that has nothing to do about Canada, that has nothing to do about Alberta, that has nothing to do about what's good for Albertans, but it is about political survival. So she developed this phrase that says, that she believes in sovereign Alberta within united Canada. Now that is a word salad. You know, it's like me telling you that I am single within the confines of my marriage. You know, it makes no sense whatsoever, but it says something to every subcategory of her supporters, and somehow she's managing to keep them together, you know, at this level. But I don't think you can do this for much longer. You know, so when she, sorry, that's a long answer to a good question. So what she is doing right now, the reason she intervened against probably good advice of lawyers in the department is to show the separatists that she's on their side. And if the court rules, which it undoubtedly will, against the separatists, then she will say, well, look, it's not me, it's those darn judges who are appointed probably by liberals in Ottawa, because Court of King's Bench is a federal court. So blame Ottawa for that decision, but it has nothing to do with us, right? So she gets to sort of skate on this thin ice for another day.
I guess the thing, like, she's already laid her cards out. I mean, she famously, in the leadership debate that was hosted by the rebel and the Alberta Prosperity Project, she famously said, "Oh no, the Alberta Prosperity Project is my what else? Yeah. They're or my or else, because they're so awesome and they're so powerful." And Modri has 16 million or whatever ridiculous number it was. It was a ridiculous number. Signatures in his database that absolutely aren't Russian bots, and he can make this happen. And it's Modri that is part of this whole little cadre of seditionists, treasonists, and she has not, in any meaningful way, tried to distance herself. So, like, what I'm trying to understand from a political calculus standpoint, if you're like, oh, I love vanilla ice cream, so good, best ice cream, and then somebody says, hey, how do you feel about vanilla ice cream? Well, it's complex.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they don't have the numbers, right? If they had the numbers, they wouldn't wait for the threshold to drop from 300,000 to 170,000, right? I am confident that we have the numbers. That's why I filed on time. And you know, legalese is difficult, but if you had a chance to listen to their arguments before the Justice of the Court of King's Bench, they're very weak. You know, they don't really have an argument. Their position is not very well thought out. They're cashing in on this continuation of anger. And if you recall, you know, when I was in office, when Premier Stelmach was Premier, they started with this fear that somehow government is going to expropriate farmers' land and take away their guns. And that actually was a big deal. People bought into it. And we were getting thousands of emails from rural Alberta that, you know, we are planning to do this. And the fact that there are no documents to substantiate the fact that we're doing it is because we're so good at hiding those documents. You know, and you couldn't win this argument, but it sort of blew over. But then it started with COVID again, and masks and vaccinations, then the truckers and the convoys, and now it's carrying on to separatism, and we're starting to see an inkling of a new one, and that is to abolish monarchy, right? So it is sort of this feeding of that beast of that anger that they move from topic to topic. But at the end of the day, from the time when they were fear-mongering about expropriation of land to today, that percentage of Albertans who sort of buy into that narrative has never been more than about 10 to 15%. But unfortunately, they're getting more and more angry, more and more vocal, and for a first time in the history of this province, they feel that they have the government of the day behind them, right? They were always sort of on the margins, and cabinet ministers and the premiers would tell them, you know, that this is nonsense, and never buy into this. But now they have a government where they can at least believe that the government is behind them, and that really emboldens them, and it empowers them, and makes them appear, you know, more intimidating.
One of the things that's striking to me about the whole thing that you've done. And I mentioned this before in the conversation, but recently my family and I made the decision to do the Great Canadian Road Trip, and we drove from Calgary to Niagara Falls, which is a very long drive. But the thing that struck me the most is we stopped at a bunch of places along the way, and aside from the license plates, you couldn't tell you were in Saskatchewan when we stopped in Regina, which is it's quite a pretty town. Beautiful houses. They have a lake by their legislature.
We had one too, the Lake of Fire.
Yeah, well, there's that. I think we have another one. But there's we stopped for ice cream at one place, and I was like, this is like Kensington. Like this is indistinguishable. The landscape, indistinguishable. Driving through Manitoba, there's a lot of bugs, but the landscape and the interactions with the people, indistinguishable. And so this notion of Alberta being this culturally unique thing is just, and I say this as somebody who's been born and raised in this province, which doesn't count for anything, by the way. We're not culturally unique. And from a political standpoint, here's the question I want to ask you, because you're doing so much that's aspirational with this thing. Why don't we see more of that focus? Like, instead of talking about, somebody drew some lines and we have oil and gas and we got very lucky and that makes us the bestest of everything, why don't we say, here's what we could be?
Yeah. Well, because, it is easier to arouse people with fear and anger, right? Like that old saying goes, when dog bites a man, no story. But when a man bites a dog, now you have a story.
And the President of the United States.
That's right. So when you hear these outrageous stories and when you see this anger, it captivates media attention. They're so over the top that they're noticeable. And those of us who are sort of leading, average lives, driving kids to dance or hockey or soccer, preoccupied with work, it's very hard to get us to march in a parade for status quo or for something better. But when you're angry about something, that's what drives the vote. And it's no secret, all of you who are politically involved, that you always need a ballot issue, right? Every party wants a ballot issue because that's how you bring people out to vote if there is an issue. If you were to say, I'm going to deliver another 4 years of status quo, who wants to go out and vote? So it's the same mechanism, and they're capturing that, and they're exceptionally good about it. And listening to your previous panelists, I totally concur with all of them. Even though on this issue of Forever Canadian and separation, even though there are 80% of us against it, and I only have to get 300,000 signatures, and when I say only, I don't underestimate that number. If this was an online petition, we probably would get it done in 1 week. But to get out people to come out and actually sign the petition, I'm asking you to do something, to break your daily routine, to drive somewhere, although there is something happening. And I don't know what it is about this petition, where people are starting to refer to it as a movement.
Yeah,
and trust me, I never wanted to start a movement. I just wanted a darn petition signed. But when we kicked this off at the old Strathcona Farmers Market a couple weeks ago, there was a family that literally drove from Fort McMurray with kids in a truck, signed the petition and drove back. We had and these stories, there by now, when we're only 2 weeks into this campaign, and there are hundreds of these stories. A couple of days ago in North Edmonton, there was a man and his wife was so mad at him because he just had a day surgery. He was bandaged up. He still had the hospital band. And instead of going home, he actually stopped and signed the petition because he insisted. So so we're reflecting on it now, because this is more than just about signing petition. This is more than Alberta staying in Canada. I think after a long time of negative politics and anger, and every time you change a channel, it's either Trump or Danielle Smith or something like this, I think Albertans and Canadians are looking for something positive. They want to vote. Thank you. And many refer to this petition as voting. And they say, I want to vote for this. So they're looking for something positive to vote for, as opposed to something to have to vote against. And I think this petition is giving people this outing. And I certainly hope that we will be able to capture the spirit, this energy, after we get, never mind 300,000, 600,000 petition signatures, and turn it into something good in this province.
But that's the point that I'm driving at, is I don't have to say, to Jason Schilling's point, I don't have to say our classrooms are the worst funded in the country. I can focus on that if I want to, but the next part of that should, to me, be our classrooms are the worst funded in the country, and they don't have to be that way, and they won't be that way. We're going to make them better. We're going to make schools cathedrals. There's no reason why we can't have that conversation, and I think that one of the things that your petition movement has caused is an awareness of that thirst for positivity, because I think you're right, the negativity, everybody's tired of it, but we can't be positive without addressing the problems that we actually have. I think there's ways to address those problems positively. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. You know, there's a lot of crying going on when people sign these petitions. Everybody has a story about why they are proud of being Canadian. And all the individuals who signed this petition are also proud of being Albertan, but they don't see it as two separate things. It's intertwined. So some are signing it because they're simply patriotic, or for the grandfather or father who fought in a war, or there are many stories. But one of the narratives, again, that we hear from hundreds of people now signing is that, thank you for giving us a voice. And I don't know why, but somehow we lost our voice. Because when there are 80% of us believing in something and 20 not, how is it that the 20 are louder than the 80, right? So I'm hoping that this exercise will remind us as a community that we actually have that voice. And no one took that voice away from us. We actually gave it up, because no one can take your voice away from you. So for those of you who are signing this petition, move on to something else. Find your voice on education funding, on healthcare, which you know a lot about, environment, and there are many things that you can express your voice on. But in a sense, we are victims of our own success. As you can tell by my accent, I wasn't born here. I was born in Poland during communism, and we sort of expect things to be good and right and just in this country. And it always has been that way, because we have never been threatened by external forces, which we now are. We were never threatened by our domestic governments, that they will somehow undermine our rights and deprive us of our either citizenship or human rights. So we haven't developed yet that instinct and that willingness to react and respond and fight back, but I'm starting to see us developing that. And it's unfortunate that we have to, but I'm glad that we are starting to respond to it, because being passive in a world that changes, where politics changes so dramatically, where we are seeing, as those three political scientists have told you, inklings of fascism stepping in, it is important that we become aware of it, cognizant of it, and push back in the early stages. And I'm hoping that this exercise and listening to you, gathering like this, is a mechanism by which we become more aware and more responsive to that change.
I have a couple other questions I want to hit you with. One of them has to do with one of the things that that some of the folks who were on the panel talked about was it can be difficult to have conversations. And the idea that I've been percolating on for the last little while is this petition a bridge to bigger conversations for people? So if you've got like Uncle Bob, and Uncle Bob has some political views, but he's not a separatist. He's a loyal Canadian. He doesn't believe in treason and sedition. I have no problem using those words because that's what it is. But if you were to go to Uncle Bob and be like, "Hey, Uncle Bob, I'm doing this thing where I'm collecting signatures for this thing. You want to sign and be a loyal Canadian, or are you a turncoat?" Okay, yeah, I'll sign your petition. Well, now we've got an inroad for conversations with Uncle Bob, and maybe we can say, "Hey, did you also hear about this thing that they're doing where they're not going to be disclosing their expenses? Boy, they're trying to walk it back, but they tried to get it over the goal line pretty darn quick." Or, "Hey, did you hear that they're changing all of the AISH stuff so that there's so many different ways that you could tailor it to Bob."
Yeah.
But does that open a window? Can this petition be that for people?
It can be that, and I think it already is. I've been involved in politics since I was young, and politics always has been divisive. We all have our political parties that we affiliate with, and we battle during election time, and some win and some lose. This is the first time, definitely in the history of this province, but perhaps even in the history of our country, where we have representatives of all political factions working together literally at the same table. And I'll give you some examples. One of our organizer, and for those of you who are sort of my vintage will remember him, is Ian McClellan. He is one of the 3 originators of the Reform Party. You don't get much further right than that.
Well, you do now.
Now you do. Now you do. Okay. Be it.
Let me grab you a bottle of water.
And then we have Anne McClellan, who is our former Liberal Deputy Prime Minister. And then we have, buddies of mine who sat across the aisle from me, like Brian Mason. We have Gil McGowan with Alberta Federation of Labor. I have a whole bunch of my former Progressive Conservative, thank you, friends. And we're literally sitting at the same table and building this campaign. And it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of teasing going on. But we are all behind this. And I can tell you, I'm learning a lot now about Alberta because we have these prejudices. When I was starting this, before this even became public, when I just filed this question, I thought, okay, we will probably do well in Edmonton. We will do somewhat well, sorry, English teacher, I'm one too, in Calgary, but rural Alberta will be a write-off. That was my presupposition. Boy, was I ever wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Today in Calgary, there was a lineup that was about 300 people long, and it lasted for several hours. They're just lining up in big numbers. In Okotoks, there was a massive lineup. Red Deer is on fire. What's happening at their farmers markets and the number of people that are coming out. But in small towns, Alberta, people are signing this petition because there are common values that we have, and now we have to start building on those common values, right? So yeah, there is Uncle Bob, and maybe Uncle Bob, doesn't, like you said, agree with us on everything, but there is so much we have in common with Uncle Bob, and we can build on that. And I'm hoping that this petition, I'm making phone calls to MLAs, all MLAs. I want them all to be behind this petition, and I hope we will get to that point. But this is an exercise that is really not political. It's nonpartisan. This is an issue that actually unites all of us as Canadians, and I'm hoping that somehow we will draw on this energy and engage those people. So when we're sitting at this table, we are discussing other issues than just being Canadian, and there's a lot of sort of learning going on, which never happens in a legislature or in House of Commons across the aisle, right? You're in a combative situation. It says you have to win the fight. If there isn't a loser, then there isn't a winner, and this dialogue, this conversation, sort of doesn't require a winner or a loser. We're all in it together for a common cause.
how can, I am going to ask you a couple questions about the topic of the day. But before we do that, how can, I mean, I trust everybody here is going to sign the petition if they haven't already.
Please.
Except for I assume there's like a press secretary or two that's hiding in here taking notes. But in the absence of that, I hope everybody seriously does consider to sign. If there's anybody who feels, if there is anybody who feels that, you know what, no, I will go. I'll go knock on a few doors. I got some friends. We do curling. If there's anybody who wants to do the collection of the signatures, what does that look like? What do people have to do? What is the process?
Thanks. So that is the trick, because there is no shortage of people who really want to sign this petition. And as I said earlier, if this was online, we'd be done by now. And we would not have 300,000 signatures, but we would be somewhere in the millions, probably. But it is pen on paper, which means that we have to get that petition to people. And the only way to do it is to have signature collectors, canvassers. And there are a variety of ways of doing it. And you know, the imagination that's out there, how people are doing it, it is so encouraging. You know, one way is door to door. But that's a hard way of doing it. It's a good way of losing weight, but a lot of people are at home. So you will be hitting maybe every 6th or 7th door where there is somebody home. But setting up a table at a farmer's market, going to where the people are. You know, a family actually in, I think it was in Spruce Grove or somewhere near Edmonton, set up a table in their driveway. And as people were walking dogs, they started signing. The word got out, and about an hour later, they had over 100 people lining up in front of their house signing this petition. So there's a variety of ways of collecting signatures, but what we need desperately is more signature collectors. As of yesterday, we're at about 2,500 people who are accredited by Elections Alberta collecting signatures out there. Yes, that's a good number. That is a good number. But we need to be at about 6,000. Signature collectors. So yes, definitely sign the petition. I always have it with me. But equally importantly, become a signature collector. And if you collect 10 signatures or 100, it will all add up. And then pick up a phone and encourage a friend or two to become a signature collector. Because a signature collector will then bring more signatures than just signing one signature on a petition. So that is sort of the exercise, you know, building a little bit of a pyramid. But the response has been phenomenal, and like I said earlier, we have signature collectors literally across the entire province, but we just simply need more of them. And I know, looking at the trajectory, looking at the numbers, we will get to 300,000 for sure. But my goal is that we exceed that number. And this is not political. You know, this is a message to our government to sort of reconsider their position on separatism. But I think even more importantly, the rest of Canada needs to know that Albertans are proud Canadians, right? And we may have our differences, and we have always had our differences, and all provinces have their differences with Ottawa or with each other, but that's actually who we are. We are a country that continuously negotiates, but negotiates according to laws and rules, and we always reach some kind of a compromise. And that's what makes us beautiful compared to many places in the world. And we need to continue doing that. But even more importantly than showing our fellow Canadians that Alberta is a proud part of Canada is to show the rest of the world. Because at a time where we are being attacked by our allies from the South, at a time probably almost as turbulent as the times of Cold War and before that, we need to be strong and united as a country so that the wrongdoers out there don't exploit any cracks that we may have within Canada. You know, the President of the United States would not be referring to us as a 51st state if he didn't know that there are people in our country who are actually proponents of that. So we need to shut that down, and we need to send a message to the world that, never mind Alberta, this country cannot be cracked. We are solid, and we will remain solid.
Oh, you teed me up there.
Did I?
You did.
All right,
Strong economic case to be made for sending a very clear message that Alberta will remain a part of Canada. Strong legal case to be made that, to the rest of the world that we're a united front. Strong for the integrity of our country. Strong for the integrity of our province. Strong for our economic outlook. You got to know what my next question is. Has Danny signed it yet?
Not that I'm aware of, but tens of thousands of Albertans have signed it, so maybe she snuck into a line somewhere and signed it. I'm trying desperately not to make this political, so I will not be challenging Premier Smith to sign this petition.
I'll do it for you.
You can do it for me. If she chooses to do so, I will be very happy that she did. If she doesn't, I won't be surprised. But we are not calling out MLAs. I certainly hope that out of their own volition and sense of duty, because none of them would be in office if they didn't swear an oath to the crown, that they actually not only signed the petition, but as they are door-knocking throughout summer and attending festivals, that they actually have a clipboard like mine with them and collect signatures, but I will leave it to them because I don't want to politicize this process at all. But as you mentioned, it is nice to see that proponents of variety of political parties are with us, and they are collecting signatures, and they are signing the petition. But we will leave the politicians out of it, and I hope that ultimately they will do the right thing. What is nice to see, though, that those who are running for municipal office right now, because election will be 8 days before my deadline on this petition, they are really participating. So we have mayoral candidates and council candidates in small towns, Alberta, and large cities, Alberta, who are adopting this as a part of their campaign, and good on them.
Do you think that's a... Do you think that's an opportunity for a litmus test when people are interacting with municipal candidates, when they're interacting with school trustee candidates? I mean, one of the things that you always hear from people is, this guy showed up at my door and I didn't know what to ask him. To have that, did you sign the Forever Canada petition as your first question? Do you think that would be a good place for people to start?
Well, I think it's a valid to ask. Obviously, in our best interest is that everybody does, right? But I think it's a valid question because, this is sort of the political issue of the day. And this issue is not just an academic exercise. This issue already has an economic impact on our province and on our country. So it is a perfectly valid question to ask any politician or any aspiring politician door knocking. What is your position on separatism? Have you signed the petition? Why don't you have the clipboard with you? Why aren't you collecting signatures for this petition? Because this issue is really at the core of a lot of things. The reason I feel so strongly about it is, first of all, because I'm every day thankful to Canada for giving me and my family a second chance. And that's, that makes me very emotional. But there are more pragmatic reasons. And our economy, if our labor movement wants well-paying and safe jobs, we need a strong economy. If businesses want to make money, we need a strong economy. If we want to earn a decent income, we need a strong economy. And history shows that every time any jurisdiction discusses separatism, economy immediately takes a hit because business needs stability. And we saw in what happened in Quebec. The best example that I always use is that there is a reason why the headquarters for the Bank of Montreal are in Toronto. They used to be in Montreal. They packed up and left during the separation discussions. And those of you who may have lived in Quebec, you know how businesses and investment was evaporating out of Quebec and mostly moving to Ontario. Look at Brexit, and look at the economy in UK right now following Brexit. And look at the Basque region in Spain. Even the Spanish government is reticent to invest in the Basque region because they really don't know what's going to happen over there. So if you want to kill our economy, carry on with the separatist discussion, and you will ask exactly what you wanted. I mentioned geopolitics and how it really makes us a target. But there's one more thing. I actually worry about safety issues as well. During the FLQ crisis, nobody really planned that terrible things will happen, and you all know what happened during the FLQ crisis. But it doesn't take a lot. When people are so angry, and when government sort of incites that anger, it just takes one person to do something stupid. And that is why I'm hoping that this process also will sort of bring unity and a closure to this topic, because once we get 300,000 signatures, that should put an end, at least to this discussion at this point in time. So there are a number of reasons why we need to shut down this whole dialogue about separation.
I got two more for you. The first one, you were Minister of Education.
And advanced education too.
Did you ever have somebody with the last name Harper working for you?
No.
Okay.
Not that I know of. No.
Okay.
No.
No reason. Second question. You were Minister of Education, Advanced Education, and that was at a period of time where Alberta's curriculum was, it was being redesigned for sure, but it was a curriculum that was in many ways the envy of many parts of Canada.
Our public education was the envy of the world. In the PISA studies, there is a body organization, a non-governmental organization in France that assesses all education systems throughout the world. And because Canada is unique, we don't have a national education system, we have provincial. Alberta education was usually within top 5 education systems in the world in variety of different categories. Those days are gone.
Did you ban any books?
No, I did not ban any books. When I was a Minister of Education, I won't be painting you a beautiful picture here because, Alberta Teachers Association and we had our differences over classroom conditions, over remuneration, and many other things. But one thing was fundamentally different. We had good, respectful conversation. And I believe that we had ministers before me, and not many after me, unfortunately, who valued public education. I had the honor of taking the ministry over from Minister Hancock. He started, phenomenal man, he's a judge right now, but massive proponent of public education. He started the rewrite of the curriculum, I took it over and we carried on. But there was a dialogue between the Teachers Association. We actually brought in students to the table, as was mentioned earlier, and parents were brought to the table, and there was a conversation. And often we left the table agreeing to disagree, but in a respectful way. Observing now from the sidelines, but understanding how the process works, I don't see that conversation anymore. And the only entity, if you can call it that way, that will suffer at the end of it are the children in the classrooms. And I hope that we return back to this conversation. But no, book banning, no smart politician will make those decisions because you don't want to wear the consequences of those decisions. You rely on experts. And as I said earlier, the Minister of Justice should rely on the experts in his department. As a education minister, you have some phenomenal people working in your ministry that give you pretty good advice, and a lot of them are actually seconded from school boards that work in the ministry. And again, I can assure you that the Minister of Education was not getting advice from the department that he should be banning certain books. That was purely a political decision. And you rely on teachers, on classroom teachers. They know best what's happening in the classroom, what the kids' needs are. Government, from my perspective, has to make difficult financial decisions. And those are hard enough for a minister to have to deal with, because honestly, there never is enough money to make the system as perfect as you wish you could make it. And as a minister, you have to fight against all the other ministers who also want money, and by, you know, the budget ultimately is finite. But ministers used to be hesitant to get into the actual delivery of education, right? And that no longer is the case, because now ideology tends to be more prevalent than it was before. And for those of you who, you know, many may not have been voting PC and you were not happy with us then, but I can tell you there was one fundamental difference between what the party that is in government now and the old Progressive Conservative Party. And the difference is this. The old Progressive Conservative Party was a little bit of a, some call it a big tent. We had the ultra-right-wing, very conservative individuals in our caucus, but then we had people who were centrist and left-leaning and more pragmatic. And the fighting took on in caucus, and at the end of a fight, a vote took place, and we would usually end up with some kind of a compromised position. And for some, it wasn't compromised enough, one way or the other, but there was a compromise that was worked out in caucus, which usually landed somewhere in the center of the far right, far left extremes. That compromise, that process of compromising is gone. So when you look at today's conservatism, it does not include any more of those individuals who would be sort of centrists. You know, they no longer, that voice is no longer heard, no longer reflective in those caucuses. So, and now we ended up with a two-party system in this province as well, which doesn't help that situation at all.
I'm going to ask you one last thing. And the first piece of it is, it's a two-parter. The first part, right? I'm so bad at this.
One last question.
One last question.
10 sub-questions.
Anybody who's ever been interviewed by me knows that if I say one last question, there's 6. Would you be willing to explain to the good folks here tonight where they can go to find all of that information if they want to become canvassers? And while you're doing that, if you would please hand me that clipboard.
There's an information. I love it. Thank you.
I need the clipboard. And a pen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. So, to sign up, yes, you have to. Are you over 18? I don't know. I don't know. He looks pretty young to me.
I think I am still allowed to vote.
So, to get any information, if you want to sign up to become a canvasser, please go onto our website, forever-canadian.ca, forever-canadian.ca, and you can sign up over there. We also use all variety of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, and all of those to communicate our messages. But the website for signing up is where you want to go. The website is continuously being built and modified. And I always tell everybody, we're sort of flying an airplane while building it, because we could not put together this campaign and we could not fundraise until day one when the clock started ticking, the 90-day clock. So we literally started building this campaign while we already started collecting signatures. So you will see great improvements over the next week or so on our website, but please log on to forever-canadian.ca, sign up as a canvasser, you know, collect signatures at work or from your family, friends. If you go to any events this summer, please collect them. We still have about, I would say, 75 days left right now, and we will get to this number, but I can't do this alone. I need your help, and I know that you will help me out. Did you see those pens?
I'm stealing a pen.
You're stealing a pen?
100% I'm stealing a pen.
This is really funny. So when I was an MLA, I had pens that you used to give out as swag, and then when I ceased to be an MLA, I asked actually the ethics commissioner, what do you do with all this swag that I have left over? It has my name on it. And he says, it's of no market value because you can't sell this stuff. Keep it. So in my garage, my wife is so happy now. In my garage, I had these boxes of pens and everything, and I'm actually using these pens right now everywhere. So other than my name, no information is valid on it anymore, but keep stealing them. The more you steal, the more my wife will be happy.
Can I ask a quick favor of you guys? Yep. I'm going to do like a quick little spiel, then we'll do the Q&A stuff. But it's a terrible angle for me. If Thomas and I stand on the edge of the thing, can I get a couple people to take a picture? Yeah. I don't want to show anybody else's stuff. I'll just...
Okay, there we go.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
so
sir.
much.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You're good to go.
Thank you. Make sure you sign up for Petition.
All right, just a couple of quick little housekeeping things, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. I think we have 3 of the panelists left. That was 0? What? Okay, cool. And I think Thomas is running out to the lobby to corral anybody trying to leave early. I got one little announcement that I want to make. That's not it. That's it. One of the things, which blows my mind, but one of the things that we keep hearing from people is they wish that there was merch available. And I quite frankly do not have the time or the ability. So the good folks at AB Resistance, who are another group that I would highly, if you're looking for somewhere to get involved, have a chat with them, because they are doing so many different things, but it's all predicated on the idea of doing a recall. Have a chat with them, because they got lots of different, anytime somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, I hate this, what do I do? I say, go talk to the folks at AB Resistance, because they're doing amazing, amazing work. But they have somebody that they were using for merch, and I was like, how do you do that? Like, and they were, oh, just talk to so-and-so. So the store is live as of right now. It went live today. My wife and I were just at a Nine Inch Nails concert, and I bought some t-shirts, and she let me spend way too much money on merch, and I don't like to do that, so the profit on these is like nothing. Because to me it's far more cool, way more cool, and worth way more than anything else, the idea that there are people who actually want to support the breakdown this way. So, and I guarantee you, if you show up to one of Danny's town halls, she will lose her mind. So, I have one other little thing I need to say. Well, a request, actually. For anybody who's been following the show for any length of time, the last year has been a little bit exciting. When I first started the show, it was started as an effort to try to get people engaged in politics and interested in politics. And it has been an insane journey, because I've gone from somebody who was fighting tooth and nail to not be called a journalist, to accepting that there are times where I journalist. And this only came after, like, my 3 lawyers basically cornered me, and there was much yelling. It's been a wild ride, and it's been a wild ride for 6 years. And it's not a ride that I have been doing by myself. The reality is when you do a story and people decide to sue you for $6 million, that causes some tension. And there's been lots of other little things that have happened. I mean, anybody who has been following the show is also aware there was a period of time where a former justice minister decided that he was going to try to get my professional registration revoked. There's lots. And it doesn't just fall on me. I absolutely could not do this show without the support of my wife, Nikki. She has been an absolute rock in all of this. She has anxiety stuffs. that's public, I could say it, because there's the whole chicken stuff. If you want a really fun thing, Google Nikki Pike and chickens, and you'll go down a rabbit hole that'll blow your mind. But she's been an absolute rock. So if I could ask before we get to the Q&A, if you folks wouldn't mind giving my wife a standing ovation, I would really appreciate it. It's hard because I go and I do things. When we were in Vancouver, we did another walk around. Well, we did a walk around with Guy Felicella, who's amazing. And he let me record the whole thing with audio. So that's going to be an episode that comes out when I have 6 hours to edit it. But it's hard because I do the things. I stand up on the stage, I have the conversations, and sometimes it's easy to not feel like you're a part of things. But she is such a critically important part that and that's the program.